Well, greetings and welcome back, gentles and ladiesmen, to another exciting episode of Unversed Cast. It's been a few months, but we're back to talk about that little blue gumball son of a bitch. And there have been a couple of interesting... Like, it did start out as a very good Sonic year, but then all of a sudden we got, like, Sonic Superstars, these updates, and the announcement of that Dream Team game, like, all in the space of, like, a month.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been interesting, but primarily we're here to talk about Sonic Frontiers, once again. The game has received 3 official content updates, including a new story segment, which is primarily what we're here to talk about, but before we do that, I'd like to introduce our guest for the day. Well, I guess he should introduce himself. Go ahead, good sir.
Hey. It's me, Nick.
Could you tell the audience quickly?
So,
Yes?
real quick, I just want you to know that when you said before we do that, my heart sunk into my stomach.
Well...
And I think you know why. I'm like, no, he wouldn't. We have a guest, so you wouldn't do that to him.
Unfortunately, the only good Sonic fanfiction I could find... Well, obviously, there's Sonic World War II Dragon by... What's his face behind Sonic High School? He made a sequel to Sonic
World War II Dragon.
Yeah, Sonic High School World War II Dragon. It's a sequel.
No.
But,
No,
but yeah, I couldn't find any good fanfiction in time, and I was too busy replaying the game that we're going to be talking about today, so, yeah. But anyways, Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do, just so people can be familiar.
Well, geez, now I kind of feel put on the spot. I always thought I was just going to talk about the game. Well, I'm known online now as NickOnPlanetRipple. Yeah, I have a YouTube channel, but I'm mainly about my books. I'm working on the 9th one. My latest one is going to be advertised on the NASDAQ tower pretty soon.
Oh, that's neat.
In Times Square.
oh yeah.
So that's got me excited.
I saw a thing on Twitter not that long ago that you got like 2nd place in was it a competition or something?
Yes, but it gets hundreds of entries, and they can't just have like one 1st or 2nd place winner, so they'll make these categories, and they'll tally points to see like, which one you make it into. Curiously, nobody who submitted a graphic novel made it past 2nd place, but I guess I made it as close to 1st place as someone with a product like mine was going to.
Yeah, give yourself some credit. Your books are great.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that's very commendable. Good job, man.
Yeah.
Longtime viewers might have known me as NickonAquaMagna before. They might remember that I used to make, video reviews of Sonic games. Back during the era where everyone was, acting angrier than they really were. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So this is me going back to my roots in a way, finally talking about Sonic again on YouTube.
Yep.
Also, Nick Beer was actually on our Star Fox Zero episode.
Was he?
Way back.
I completely
That feels
forgot
like
about that.
ancient history.
Ooh.
Yes.
It feels like you're unearthing
Yeah.
texts that you should not unearth. It's been way too long.
It's just as the stone tablets predicted.
Well, speaking of the Sonic, since it's been a year since the game originally came out, I've had a chance to replay the whole thing. I believe Dan has as well.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get to the updates, let's just give our quick thoughts on where we stand on Sonic Frontiers, the base game.
Okay.
I'll let you guys go first.
All right. Well, I was the most positive on the game in our original podcast, and I think I kind of let Jeb and Jay sort of gaslight me into thinking the game was worse than it was, because after a while, the podcast got really negative. And, I don't begrudge them for that. That's their opinion. They have a right to it, of course. But then when I replayed the game, I'm like, no, this game's great. I think it might actually be one of my favorite Sonic games now. I really just enjoy it. I mean, I wouldn't want this to become the new standard, and I think most people would agree, but as a one-off thing, as a person who loves collectathon games, I really enjoy it. Just running around collecting all the trinkets. If there's one big criticism, or one thing that got worse for me, it was the story. I think I was kind of middling on it when we did our previous podcast, but I've since had the opportunity to read the first 2 big IDW story arcs, the Neo Metal arc and the Metal Virus arc, and after having read those, Sonic Frontiers comes off as the most boring, uneventful story possibly in the entire 3D series, honestly. There's so much nothing happening. Like, I think I was willing to give it more of a chance the first time because I thought it was going somewhere, but when I was replaying the game, I just wanted to skip every cutscene and move on. And it really interrupts the flow. Like, I think, Dan, when we were talking about Tears of the Kingdom, we were talking about how it was kind of annoying that you want to go play the water temple, but you got to jump through a bunch of story hoops before they'll let you play it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that in Sonic Frontiers, where it's like, oh, I'd like to go over to this island and start exploring, but I can't because the bridge is down, so I have to talk to Tails a bunch of times to get the thing to come down, and then I gotta do that stupid skydiving minigame. It's just, I wish that they had just left it more open. But it's also one of those things where you can quickly get through all that stuff, and there's, compared to the stuff I like, there's really not that much of it. So I can kind of get over
the
it.
skydiving minigame brought back those death egg rings.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? In 3D?
They did.
I'm just horsing around. To me, that's like people getting excited that the laser Cheerios were another M.
The Rinkas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understood that reference.
But yeah, those are my thoughts on Frontiers. Still like it.
So who's next?
What about you, Mr. King?
Well, in a weird twist of fate, I decided to be as... I really, really, really wanted to understand Frontiers as much as I possibly could.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to play the game again. I'm going to 100% the game. And I did do it.
Oh, goodness.
I actually don't know if I have photos of it, but I have the footage. I 100%ed the whole thing just so that I could get like a very, very clear picture of what it is that people are clearly into, you know?
Yeah.
Because there is something about it that I don't quite understand that people do like. And I really wanted to put my best foot forward there and try to get it. And in some ways, there are some things about it that I appreciate more than I did at the time. I will admit that. I think that there is a kind of fun to just like running around and doing slope jumps and stuff when they work properly.
Yeah.
When you're not like tripping over a cliff or whatever. For some reason, the Ares, the second island, is like really bad about inconsistent. Like sometimes you'll try to jump off a cliff and Sonic will just be like, okay, all of your speed is gone. I don't know what that's about. But there like
there's a problem with the game's design. It just seems to rear its ugly head most of all on that island for some reason.
Yeah. But you know, I realized that I had always liked probably my favorite thing about the game in the original was when you could like boost off of a rail and fly into the sky, you know?
Yeah.
And now that they've added like a spin dash, you can kind of do that more easily. I think they also like reworked. I don't, it's a little bit hazy. This was like, I recently traveled to Japan. It was like over a month ago, I think, that I did this, and like the things in my head are really fuzzy about it. But also, I think they like reworked something with the physics. Like your air jumping is like fixed or something.
Yeah. They added a slider for jump deceleration.
Yeah.
Because in the original release, it was really sensitive, especially in the 2D sections. And I don't know how many of you guys have played Hi-Fi Rush this year.
Yeah, I have.
I want to.
Yeah, it's great. I recommend it. But that game also has 2D sections in it. And I think what I realized is a speed and a jump distance that feels right in 3D feels not nearly enough in 2D.
Yeah.
Because those 2D sections felt kind of stiff in that game. And the same thing is kind of true for Sonic Frontiers. But then again, even Unleashed managed to get the 2D speeds right, so I don't know what's going on there. But they did.
2D is like a whole separate thing. Because I, honest to God, still don't like those, unfortunately.
Fair.
But like the stuff on the islands, specifically like the first, second, maybe like the the fifth as well. The third island I'm not a big fan of still. It's a bit weird, but I had fun, like, spin dashing around, using momentum in the way that it was probably intended to be used to begin with. So, like, in those aspects, I did come to appreciate things that I didn't appreciate. Well, I did appreciate it, but maybe not as strongly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I mean, I'd love to come back here and say that I just fell in love with the game, but I didn't. Like, I really tried. I gave it my all. But a lot of the things that I had problems with, I still have problems with.
Yeah.
I still don't really... The story's kind of boring. There are parts of it that, I don't know, they just did the exact opposite of landing. I really, really, really am sick of seeing the past again.
Oh,
And
yeah,
it's
the
like-
nostalgic throwbacks.
Because it's at a point where I don't know what Sonic even looks like to me anymore, because you like enter a portal and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go play a level and we're in Green Hill again. And it's like, at this point, I feel like I'm just numb to that aspect specifically of like, can we just get a game where they like make, like, I guess like Superstars? Because, you know, Superstars, from what I've seen, some of its zones look similar to old zones, but like at least they're new fucking zones, you know? Like, that's all I want. But, you know, that's like a small thing. It's like, there's a bunch of stuff like that that just does not add up to an experience that I think is all that memorable or unique, and that it's unique in some ways, but it's not something that I ever really think that I'll be returning to. I don't know. It's just, I can't do it. I'm glad a lot of people seem to like it, but for me, it's kind of, Sonic has lost a lot of the things that I used to love about it, and accepting that has been tough, but I think that I'm at a place where I can kind of just follow it and dislike the things that I dislike, watch people enjoy it, and then wait for the next thing, and hopefully the next thing will be more to my liking. That's where I'm at with it.
Well, speaking of the next thing, not to interrupt the other two gentlemen in the call, but I mean, Dream Team does look like it might be more to your liking. It looks more like
It
an
honestly
adventure game.
does, yeah. I am actually kind of looking forward to that game. The only thing about it is that it's a mobile game. It looks a lot better than most mobile games do, but yeah, I am interested in that, honestly.
Yeah, like, I just recently replayed Sonic Lost World to 100% for the first time in like 8 years. And I was kind of struck going back to that game just how much creativity and effort there was to try to make something really fresh and different. And there does seem to be some of that creative spirit coming back in Dream Team. So the only thing is I don't own a single Apple device, so it's like the one...
Nor do I.
Actually, I do own an old Mac that I bought to play Toy Story 2 on Macintosh, but that's it. And that's not going to play Dream Team, so...
Do you guys remember the little iPods that were like clip-ons?
The Shuffle?
I think it's like there's not even a screen. It's just like a little thing that like you clip to your shirt and it has like a button for you to press play.
I think that was the Shuffle.
Maybe. I have that. I can't play Sonic Dream Team with that.
I'd like to see you try.
I looked on the website. It wasn't
play
compatible.
Sonic Dream Team on my iPod Nano.
But Ryan, why don't you tell us about your current thoughts on Sonic Frontiers?
Well, I mean, because like, actually, you were saying that like the podcast felt mostly negative, but I was with you in the sense that I liked the game. I never thought it was like super peak, super hype, like how a lot of people think it is. But it did a lot of things that I've been wanting Sega and Sonic Team to do, and it did them well enough for me to walk away from the game being like, okay, well, you know, I put like 25 hours in the game, $60 for the game. I think that's worth it. You know, that's like the length of like an average JRPG.
As opposed to Superstars.
As opposed to Superstars, which should not be priced at $60. But this game kind of has like a similar thing with, I guess like No Man's Sky or Cyberpunk 2077, where the game essentially gets quote unquote fixed as time goes on. Like the developers stay with the game, they add on to it, they fix problems that people have.
Yeah.
But what Sonic Frontiers has that maybe those other games didn't is like a more solid foundation. Because like with the other two games, for example, it's like when they came out, people blasted those games to high heaven.
Yeah.
Whether they were broken, whether they were lacking mechanics that were promised in the pre-release, whatever the case may be, it's like, people didn't like those games when they first came out. Sonic Frontiers has the benefit of having people be more positive towards this game than the others. So it's already taking something that was already pretty good and just making it even better. So it's just like, you're adding more things to do, more things to collect. You're adding new, like the spin dash, which completely changes the game, new physics options, which completely change the game. And I played through the game a handful of times already. I've been working on a project for Sonic Frontiers, and it's not going anywhere right now, but no, I still like the game quite a bit, if that, for whatever it's worth.
Yeah.
Like, my opinion hasn't, like, if I still had to give it a grade, it would still probably be like a B-tier Sonic game for me. It's not one of my favorites, but it's still one that I really enjoy, and it's really easy to come back and replay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you guys thinking that, like, the story wasn't really anything great, but I do appreciate the fact that there were moments where the game slowed down and allowed these characters to actually talk.
Yeah.
I didn't realize, like, how much actually...
that as well. Even though I don't think it entirely worked in the end, I am glad that we're past the days of, like, throwing in, like, a fourth wall joke every 5 seconds. Like,
yeah, I'll just stick to
So
aliens if that's alright with everybody.
The energy of the previous stories was kind of dire. Like, because I at least look at Frontiers, I'm like, okay, at least it's trying to do something.
Yeah, and I would rather have something like this than something like from Forces or Lost World or Colors or Generations.
Mm-hmm.
It's a game that I like.
This is just a small moment, but I don't want to forget to bring it up. So I'm not a Son-Amy shipper. I don't think those two work well as a couple. But there is a moment in this one that, there are many moments in this game that make it feel like it's been at least a couple years since, whatever last one, even though Ian Flynn insists that the entire series has been over a year and a half.
No.
But, yeah. These characters, these characters,
crazy stuff.
These characters feel older. There's this moment where Sonic and when you leave him idle and he just says random things, there's one moment where he says, Amy, oh, I wish I'd said something sooner. So that implying that maybe he felt something for her at some point, but just didn't act on it, and now that ship has sailed, that's fascinating writing. That's the kind of thing I'd like to see more of.
I do remember that line. It is kind of wild that line exists. I remember hearing that and being like, that's a bit like
I said,
Sonic
it's
is not usually a series that ever touches on anything like that, so...
But, I like the feeling of, like, change and progression, and that these are very different characters than they were even back in the adventure days.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, enough from me. Back to you.
Oh, well, no, that was pretty much my whole take, is that, like, it really hasn't changed much. It just takes something that I already liked and just made it better, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Big asterisks there for the most part. But
yeah.
We'll cross that road when we get there.
So, I'm probably going to be the most positive about this game. So, firstly, the overworld, the islands. I do consider it fun to just run around the islands collecting things. In fact, even the first island. Sometimes I'll just load up a new save and just play through that first one. Just, like, spend 2 hours on it, and that's my chill time for the day. Although I think the second island is probably my favorite, because that's when it really opens up. It's a much bigger island, but it's covered in all kinds of, like, landmarks and geographic formations that I can recognize from far away. It has those floating ruins that are basically entire stages in their own right. It feels like almost perfect. And then you get to the third island, and it's just random. There's forced 2D gameplay everywhere. I don't hate it, but that's where the game really wears me down. Where at first I'm like, wait a second, so there aren't as many islands as I thought? And then by the end of it, I'm like, oh, thank God there aren't as many islands as I thought. Because that one really tires me out. I get to the fourth one, I'm like, yeah, okay, it's basically a formality. And then I get to the fifth island. And in the normal campaign, I just got what I needed and zipped right to the final boss. Because I was just tired. Again, I didn't hate the game, but I had basically had my fill of the islands. But then the DLC came along and essentially added an entire final stage, an extra like 3 to 5 hours to the game. But what was funny is it's basically the game's equivalent of Canon's Core or End of the World. You know, it'd be nice if we could play as the other characters earlier in the game, like play as Knuckles a bit on the second island and so on. But we spend enough time with them that it still feels cool to, you know, have the whole gang come together at the end. And that gave me, like, I had so much fun with that last island in that DLC. Just getting to know those characters again. But I realize the DLC is going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people. And I admit, I had to cheat. I had to switch to easy mode. Because a couple of those towers, I just could not make it to the top without those extra balloons and stuff to homing attack on. And I couldn't make it through that stupid boss rush without easy mode, where your parry window is much, you know, bigger.
It's actually good.
Yeah, I got it on my second try once I switched to easy mode. So that's a little annoying. But here's the thing. I spent most of my playtime in that last campaign doing stuff that I liked. You know, just climbing around things and exploring and grabbing stuff and playing the minigames. Just killing time, basically. And I spent a comparatively very small portion of that playtime stuck on the towers of the boss rush. But most other people spend a small chunk of their playtime exploring that last island and having fun goofing around with the other characters, and most of their playtime is stuck on those parts that they end up hating. So I got it, you know, I guess I'm trying to say my experience it was very different than apparently most other people's experience. Most people spent most of the time doing stuff they hated, and I spent most of it doing stuff I liked. So that might color my view a bit. I shouldn't have to switch to easy mode to get through those last sections, but it's like that was their response, like, oh, you think this game is too easy, huh? Okay, f*** you.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like my takeaway from the DLC, where it felt very reactionary. Where it's like, oh, you think the game's too easy, so we're just going to make all the bosses be super, super hard. Oh, you didn't like the tower section? We'll do it again. Like, from the fourth island, you got to do that shit again. Except no 2D, or like, no safety net, no nothing. You fall down, get f***ed.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Oh, you don't like the parry? Well, here's the perfect parry. Eat shit. Oh, okay.
Anyway, I will say this game essentially restored my hope for Sonic, because it brought back so many things that Sega hasn't touched in a long time. It feels like nature is healing from the damage done, not by Sonic 06 itself, but by Sonic 06's reception. You know, the way people lambasted that game, I think we may have gone a little overboard, because Sonic Team and Sega took away all the wrong lessons from that. They thought the adventure formula itself was the problem. So they walked away from that game going like, okay, no other playable characters, no more cringy rock music, no more somewhat serious try-hard story, no more fully 3D stages, no more adventurous controls. None of that shit. Never again. And then they have Crisis City and Sonic Generations for some reason. But it's like, they were so terrified of possibly making another game that felt like Sonic Adventure because it might remind people of Sonic 06. And it doesn't help that every time a new game is teased, some obnoxious interviewer would go up to a developer like, hey, so, is this new game gonna be anything like that dumpster fire Sonic 06? Like, they just never let them live it down. So it's no wonder, you know, that they've been like terrified of their own shadow. And then this game comes along, and it brings back, you know, the edgy music, and it, you know, the other playable characters now, and a more moody story, and it brings back all that stuff. Even the controls, you know, the sliders. If you want Sonic to control more like a car with like wind resistance and, you know, difficulty steering, you can play like that. But if you want to play more like in the adventure games where you could turn on a dime, no matter how fast you're going, you can play like that. And I'm amazed by that kind of flexibility and accessibility in a Sonic game. I hope that becomes the standard from now on. But the part that blew me away the most was some of the cyberspace levels basically being ported from Adventure 2. I know, to some, that probably sounds lazy, but I think it's them testing the waters to see if that kind of gameplay still works. If they could release a game nowadays with levels built like that, and people would have fun with them. Because apparently that was up for debate. That was a question that needed answering. And now they have their answer, and they're making, you know, they made some other cyberspace levels that were entirely 2D, that weren't taken directly from the adventure games, but felt like they could have been in an adventure game. And I think it's given them the confidence to go further in that direction. Basically, this game proved to everyone, and Sega, that it's okay to, you know, bring back those things from the adventure formula that they thought were radioactive for so many years. And it's not even just in this game. Think about, like, we have 3 games now. You know, this with the DLC. You have Sonic Superstars, which I know that's a 2D game, but it still counts. And now Sonic Dream Team. Like, 2023 was the year that Sonic's friends came back. It's been normalized so quickly. It was that easy, apparently. And I don't know, I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone. I feel almost like the backlash of 06 and all that resulted from that almost feels like it never happened.
Wasn't there...
It is kind of odd that, like, there was a day where they were just kind of like, yeah, you know, you're going to be able to play as, like, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. No big deal. And then they just kind of dropped it for free, and I was like...
I think they realized that all the stuff they were cutting out of these games were things that people actually liked about the adventure games, the early 3D Sonic games. And again, this game proved that those things still work. I see this game as like a testing ground for those, and I feel like whatever they make next is going to be tightened up, and it's just going to, you know, have more of that stuff that people liked about this game. They're listening to feedback, and the general positive sentiment I've seen from people for this game has been like, yeah, okay, there are some things that are kind of wonky, but here are the things I like. Do more of that. And it sounds like they're listening.
We can only hope. I was going to say, wasn't the marketing for Sonic 4 Episode 1 like this really toxic, here are all the really Sonic friends who aren't going to be in Sonic 4?
It was.
Yeah.
I remember that.
It was a different time.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And then, you know, flash forward a few years later when the Sonic 2 movie comes out, and then you have people losing their f***ing minds when Shadow's in the post-credits shot or whatever. Oh. It's like, no, it's not that, you know, people still give a shit. So, please, let's not pretend that they don't.
How crazy is it that the Olive Garden guy was the gun commander the whole time?
And the funny thing is, they weren't sponsored to throw that in there. They really did just think it'd be funny to throw a random reference to Olive Garden in there for some reason. They did it for free.
I mean, hey, when you're there, your family.
Okay, but look, I know
Speaking of which, this podcast is sponsored by Olive Garden.
I know I probably sound like an apologist for a shitty Sonic game, but I'm trying to say, like, you know, try to understand why people like me appreciate it so much, because it brought back, you know, at least some of the adventure formula. It did things that I thought Sonic would never do again, and it pulled them off. It showed how easy it is. So... Yeah, it still bugs me that the cyberspace levels are all using assets from Generations still. Some parts of the story do bug me that we're just like following Sonic along his like amateur archaeological trip or whatever. Sorry, I just had a massive brain fart.
That's all right.
COVID.
You know, it's interesting that you say that you were the most positive on this game, because I 100%ed the whole thing twice, including this DLC.
Oh, that's another thing that
I do want to say...
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to kind of like add on to, like, I actually did 100% this game as well. That's actually like one of the things I really like about the Spin Dash is that it made 100% completion like feel worth it. It's like there just came a point where it's like, oh, hey, well, I got almost all the memory tokens on this island. I might as well get them. Oh, then I might as well join the next one. The next one. If the Spin Dash wasn't as fun to use as it is in this game, I probably would not have bothered. So the Spin Dash actually does a lot to carry this game when it comes to like the post game cleanup.
Yeah. So I've noticed, like, even with some of the DLC updates, now there are all these new structures that they're basically just ramps that are daring you to boost or spin dash off of them and fling yourself into the sky. And that has a lot of classic Sonic DNA. I noticed, like, there's more adventure DNA now thanks to these DLC, and even a bit more of like, hey, what if we were trying to, you know, just fling yourself off of a ramp or a ledge like in the classic games? How crazy, like, the hang time you could get. And I don't know, it's just doing things that I never thought 3D Sonic would do. Even, like, when I played through the last island as Amy and the other characters, I noticed, like, one of the loops, the camera follows you through the loop instead of cutting to the side and making it automated. That's something that was happening, like, years and years ago in fan games. And they finally figured out how to do it in a Sonic game by just trusting players to make it through the loop under their own steam and not, like, rage that the game was broken because they fell.
Yeah. Speaking of the Spin Dash, let's quickly talk about the first two updates. I don't think we will have that much to say. Obviously, the Spin Dash was the highlight, but I do want to talk about the new Coco, quote-unquote, and those action chain challenges.
Do you mean to tell me that you're still thinking about the Coco?
You still thinking about that Coco, Amy? I heard that when I was replaying it after, I think it was Jeb or you were clowning on it in the last podcast, and I laughed. Yeah, but there are like these, a lot of it seemed to be like there was some kind of birthday cosmetic thing that I immediately turned off. There was that, the music jukebox that had like a 500th the selection of the Generations equivalent, and you had to go out of your way to unlock the base soundtrack, so that sucked. I mean, it was more stuff to find, which I appreciated, but it was also kind of interesting to play like Sky Road Act 2 music over Chaos Island. Go, wait a minute, this music is so much more memorable than the stuff that's playing in the islands. I've grown to appreciate the Frontier soundtrack, but it's not like peak Sonic soundtrack or anything. It took me...
Well, see, for me, it's right up there for me. I love the Frontier soundtrack.
Well, I mean, I grew to like it a lot more after actively listening to it, and just like sometimes when I'm working on stuff, I'll just have like the Open Zone music all on a playlist together and just listen to that. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is actually pretty good. But I didn't realize that until I actually sat down and listened to it. Whereas, you know, I heard Sky Road Act 2 once, and I remember it for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I was kind of disappointed with the jukebox. The new Coco, there's this one section on Kronos Island, whatever the first one was, that made me want to pull my hair out. I don't know if...
Was it the tower?
It was like a tower-ish thing where you had to keep pressing buttons to make...
Yeah.
And then you had to like awkwardly...
That's probably the weirdest Coco thing that they had. I didn't like... That was weird.
Yeah, it felt oddly out of place. Because, like, the other ones were challenging, they were tricky, but that one felt more like something that would be in the third DLC, to be honest. And the action chain challenges, I know my friend Abby likes them, and I don't know what you guys think, but I was kind of annoyed with them. Because
I liked them, like, the first couple times. I don't know why there are, like, 10 of them.
Yes.
Every island. Because a lot of the time, you'll just pick one up. And I mean, granted, they are spread out throughout the map, but some of them are close enough together that I'm like, well, I guess I'll just go run around here again. Mm-hmm. And you just end up doing the same path a bunch of times.
I found that these were more effective when doing a fresh playthrough. It made getting memory tokens and getting parts of the map, fighting bosses and everything like that, I guess I feel like... Because, like, the whole point of Sonic Frontiers is that, like, you're supposed to do everything. You're supposed to, like, find a rhythm to, like, get as much memory tokens and clear as many, like, mini challenges as possible. I think the action chain challenges does a better job of, like, showing you, like, how you're supposed to get into the rhythm that this game is trying to put down. Because I played it, like, before doing this session, and actually my most recent playthrough of Sonic Frontiers, that's what I did. Like, I did, like, a complete new playthrough, like, level 1, no New Game Plus, no nothing. And I found that getting the memory tokens for story progression, especially on the last one, because, like, the last one, Sage just has, like, a huge, like, memory token spike, like, to get the last Chaos Emerald. I didn't have that problem. Like, I was never short, and I think it was because of these action chain challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess my problem with them is, number one, like King said, there are way too many of them. I think if you cut it down to like 3 or 5 per world, it would have been better, because there is so much overlap when you have like 8 of them, or however many it was per zone. And it's also one of those things where, like, it's not really intuitive, the whole score multiplier thing. I think they copied that from the pinball minigame, actually. Where it's like, you need to collect the spheres to get up to 128, and then you actually start trying to grind points, because the orbs aren't worth points. But it always seemed to me like, if you knew the specific route the game wanted you to take, you could get the S rank really easily. But if you don't know the specific route, like most people will, then it's just kind of like, okay, I have no idea what I did wrong. Because it's like, I feel like with most of the previous Sonic games, nowadays they're better about giving you specific feedback about what you need to do for the next rank. But even before that, in like Adventure 2 and Heroes, there was usually like a sense of like, okay, if I hadn't taken that hit earlier, I might have been able to finish the level slightly faster. Or if I hadn't gotten hit while I had locked down to 9 guys as tails, then I would have gotten that extra perfect bonus, and that might be enough. Whereas with this, there's not really a clear sense of what you're doing wrong and what the game wants you to do differently. And then you couple that with there being like 36 of them, and then it gets really old. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing that bothered me with these is that, like, let's say if you get the S rank and you clear an action chain challenge, you get the S rank, it just plops you back to where that challenge was. So it's like, oh, so I made like all this progress. I cleared so many challenges and everything like that. And it's still saved, like it still carries over, but it just plops you, like you can
turn that off in the menu.
What happened?
You can turn that off in the menu.
Well, son of a bitch.
It's actually very useful.
Well, then there's a new
because I took a different approach from you, where I did all the memory tokens first, and then I went back for the action chain challenges. I didn't really think to try to do them together. And in that case, having it reset is actually very useful, because if you screw up and get an A rank, you can just start over right away.
Yeah.
But I'm fairly certain there's an option in the menu to turn off that teleportation thing. If I'm wrong, well, you guys know what I'm going to edit in. So. But yeah, like, King, Nick, any other thoughts on the first two DLCs?
I mean...
Not really. I waited until the third DLC dropped and just downloaded it all at once. It's not because I didn't want to keep playing the game, I was just too dang busy.
It's a little bit blurry what comes in what, but like, because I did it all at once, but the spin dash was f***ing cool. That like legitimately increased my appreciation of the core gameplay quite a lot. I mean, it does take a while to get it, I guess, but I don't know. That was cool. The Coco challenges were like the most engaged I was by like the floating island, you know, for the most part. Yeah, there are a few things that I felt were kind of weird, and there are a few times doing the Coco challenges where I feel like, how do I describe this? Like it's punching above its weight in the sense that like it is, I guess it gets more into that in the DLC a little bit. There are some problems of like, it is now trying to do things that I do not know if it was ever equipped to do. But, you know, aside from that, I think that the DLC stuff, harmless at worst, really. It was like, there was some cool additions that I got some fun out of.
Yeah, I would agree that aside from the spin dash, the new Coco platforming sections were probably the highlight. Except for that one in Kronos Island. That one sucks. I remember Ryan's like,
really?
But he's the king. One. You gotta love that Coco. And I'm like, I'd give him the Marie Antoinette treatment, the Louis XV, if he wasn't literally just ahead. I'll probably fly over most of the audience's heads. Speaking of heads.
Didn't fly over mine. I got you, Exa. Don't worry.
But yes.
I see you.
Now we have the final horizon, everybody. Let's start with just your brief little 2-second review. Yay or nay? What did you guys think?
Yay.
Yes. Somewhere in the middle. I don't know what's in between.
I will have to cast my nay vote, unfortunately.
It's kind of unfortunate that I phrased it that way, because even I wouldn't give a thumbs up or a thumbs down for this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like... I wouldn't say I like hate it, but I also, I don't know, I don't think I like it.
Yeah, I just had a blast, you know, climbing around as Knuckles and flying and shooting things as Tails and doing basic platforming stuff as Amy. I guess, look, it needs to be stated again. This is monumental. This brought Sonic's Friends back in 3D. And I really needed to sink in with people how crazy and incredible that is. Because we went all these years with that being a line Sega wouldn't cross. Because for some reason, it was up for debate if that kind of gameplay could still work. You know, if that could still be done. And here with this game, they just went for it.
That, like, being able to play as these characters again is pretty damn cool. And it is something that we have not had in 3D for a very long time.
17 years.
theoretically, it is very cool.
But
I'm sorry. I thought you were done, King. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm not done, but like for now, that is my review.
No, because I was also like when I was playing this for the first time, like there was a moment when I was playing as each of these characters where I thought, it really has been a while since we've played as like actual like Knuckles and Tails and Amy. Like, you know, we got the Sonic and the Black Knight where we play as like more fantastical versions of like Shadow, Blaze, and Knuckles, but I don't really know if that counts.
Because in a game that isn't a spin-off series.
Yeah, it's also just like the way how, again, like those games play, it doesn't really play like a Sonic game per se. So to have it like in a core Sonic game and to play as like actual Knuckles, Tails, and Amy, you know, when I unlocked like the infinite glide for Knuckles and when I unlocked the tornado for Tails, I don't know. Like, listen, I have some things to say about like how they actually handled the playable characters here.
Yes. But
I did have that moment where I'm like, holy shit, we f***ing back. I had that moment for a second. It was there.
The boys are back in town.
Because look, now they're going to take what they did in this game and they're going to incorporate it into future games. And they're going to tweak it. You know, they didn't get it perfectly right their first time, but they've been listening and they've been correcting course like all throughout this. That's basically what all of this DLC is.
You know,
they didn't need to make any, but they just kept adding.
I will say that I remember when I finished Frontiers and we were talking about, this is when I finished it for the first time.
Yeah.
I was talking with people about how, like, you know, maybe they'll take this formula into the future, but I wasn't really sure because we've seen this song and dance before. The fact,
yeah,
I am no longer quite like that because, what is the director's name?
Kishimoto.
Morio Kishimoto. I don't know why I had a brain lapse. He is so religiously into fan feedback that I am now no longer unsure about the future in terms of like he is probably going to make damn sure that this is going to be a thing that they do again. So in that regard, I have completely changed my mind. I am no longer unsure. He is most certainly going to listen to fan feedback because that's what he was doing for like the past year.
Yeah.
So I'm not unsure about that anymore.
I mean, even the entire extra final boss, you know, where you fight Supreme possessed by the end, that was basically there because people weren't satisfied with that Ikaruga final boss. And good on them for that.
You know, speaking of that witch, and King, you know where I'm going with this. Isn't it bizarre that there are two games in recent memory that inexplicably end in an Ikaruga clone?
Yeah.
What game ends in an Ikaruga clone?
Well, you haven't finished it yet, so I don't want to spoil it for you, but it came out this year.
Oh.
You know, this is just a bit of a side thing, but it kind of astounds me that there hasn't been another Sonic anime since Sonic X, almost 20 years ago. Even as the games become increasingly anime-like, you know, with the crazy boss fights and just like all the moves that Super Sonic does. It's like they tried it with the OVA, they tried it one more time with Sonic X, and then they just never did it again. You know, they had Sonic Boom, which was basically Seinfeld, and then they have the new series, which it's alright, but it's like, why does everything have to be CG?
I guess, EXO, what about, like, what's your quick take on the final expansion? Like, how do we want to unpack this? Because there's a lot.
How do we broach
Where do we start?
All right, here's my biggest problem with it. So, look, people have complained that the parry is too easy. You can just hold it down without any timing or whatever. I'll be frank, there's a reason I don't play games like Devil May Cry much or other hack and slashes. I just can't get the hang of parrying. It is so freaking stressful that it ruins those types of games for me. So I'm glad that, you know, the parrying is so easy and so abusable in this game because means, you know, I can play it. And it's why I'm glad that, you know, the combat isn't too complicated and doesn't have like juggling and stuff because I don't want to spend a long time beating up any one thing in a Sonic game. I want to just hit it a few times and move on.
Yeah.
Same issue that I have with the bosses in Sonic Superstars is they have these Simon Says waiting games where you gotta let them take their turn and then you can take your turn and hit them once, maybe two times. because people thought it was some kind of a problem that you could just finish a boss fight in 10 seconds in the classic games. Similarly, like, if they are going to add some kind of, like, combat to, a Sonic game, I don't want it to be terribly complex because I don't want it to slow the gameplay down. So anyway, look, I guess what I'm saying is I'm glad they didn't get lost in the sauce. I'm glad that, they didn't end up becoming, like, the only thing Sonic Frontiers was about. It's basically just there to add a little extra flavor.
Yeah.
That said, they let you go through the entire game, coasting on not having to learn how to properly parry. And then with the boss rush, they demand that now, suddenly, you know how to do it perfectly. Without telling you that easy mode makes it easy, makes it more generous.
Those animations were not built for a perfect parry.
Yes.
Let me tell you that.
Yeah.
They are some of the most unintuitive animations to block that I have seen.
Yeah, they were not
quite
built
some time
for the player to time them within 0.5 seconds. They just weren't. I didn't get a chance to answer Ryan's question. Against my better judgment, I think I'm going to have to say I liked it for the most part, but that comes with about 15,000 caveats. The first time I played it, I think I hated it. So here's was like my basic first impressions, right? You start out as Amy, then immediately near you there is this map challenge thing where you have to raise these towers, and then you have to go through those stupid blue rings in a specific order, but it's not clear what that order is because they don't have proper ASF for it. And then there's like a wall climbing section nearby, and I couldn't figure out how to climb the wall. Then eventually I learned Amy can't climb walls at all, so I don't know why that's immediately at the start of the game. There is this one map challenge that nearly made me lose my f***ing mind. I don't know if you guys know which one it is. It's the one where you have to hit the ball into the circular rings near like 3 holes in the ground. And I swear to God, I didn't know it was possible to make a ball puzzle worse than Dusty Desert, but they managed to do it.
Yeah, I played those ones as Tails. I basically had to cheat and like throw a wrench at one just because that's a faster way to see which way it'll go. And then when I felt confident enough to jump into it, then it's so finicky. Because it's not just aiming it left to right. You also have to hit it from the right height and with the right force so that it doesn't go like above the rings or past them.
And then also immediately near where Amy starts, there's like an Elder Coco with like a headdress that you can walk up to, but you can't interact with him. And there's not really indication as to why you can't interact with him or what he's supposed to be for. There's just a lot of that in this DLC where it's just like, it's missing a, I can't use that right now kind of feedback. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's just like, why would they put a Sonic and Knuckles only running section right next to where Amy starts? Why would they put NPCs that you can't talk to? And that's another problem, is that there are a lot of platforming sections you can finish with each character that are story specific that you just can't do anything with until the game decides that you can.
Yeah.
And there's not really any distinction between those. It's like you can get all the way to the end of this very long platforming section where you're gliding through things, and then you get up there and you just can't interact with the thing. And then there's the cyberspace levels, which we will talk about much more later. I have things to say.
I do too!
It just felt like the thing wasn't...
the variance in tonality of your two voices there.
Oh my god, and then there was the f***ing boss rush made me want to peel my scrotum off. It was just the worst thing I've ever... Okay, that was my first playthrough, and then I got to the final boss, and by that point I was just sick of it and wanted to get it over with, and that's when I suggested that we do this podcast in the first place, because I wanted to vent. But since it had been a while since King went off to Japan, and he was there for a month, it had been a while, so I'm like, okay, I'll sit down and play this for a little bit just to refresh my memory. And I don't know, since I already played it vanilla, this time I'll play it with mods. I got a mod that fixes Knuckles. We'll talk about that. And I got a mod that expands the perfect parry to 2 seconds. And I turned off all the delay animations for all the other characters. I played through the whole thing again, and I think what I realized on the second playthrough is that the open zone stuff is actually pretty good, for the most part.
Some of the Tails platforming sections were some of the most inventive things I've seen in a Sonic game.
Yeah.
Like really pushing the limits of what is possible with characters like these. And then you could just skip all of it with this plane.
Yes. You can do that for Knuckles as well. Like, if you get up high enough, you can just glide over to stuff.
Or you could just use the infinite jump glitch.
Which I did not find. So I did not use that.
Oh, yeah, no, I used that for a lot.
And there's also a cheat in the Hedge Mod Manager that lets you switch characters with a button combination, which is also pretty useful, so you don't have to walk all the way back to Master King Coco just to switch characters and grab the one thing you missed. So it's like, when I used mods to fix all of the problems that the designers shouldn't have left in the final game, it was pretty good. But by default, it was kind of a pain in the butt, and we can get more detail of it now. Let's talk about the characters, like how they play and stuff.
The characters are kind of like, they kind of are emblematic of like the problem that I have with the DLC as a whole, or with the Final Horizon as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And it is nice to have it. It is nice that they put in the effort to try to shake things up and to try to give us a more satisfying conclusion. But ultimately, I kind of walked away from this after I beat it, and I played through this twice, and I'm still wondering what exactly the point was. It feels kind of inconsequential, because we don't really ever learn anything new in the main playthrough. Like, there's a lot of like optional stuff where you could run up to Eggman in the overworld, and Amy could be like, Eggman, tell me about these rocks. Why are they stacked like this? And the Eggman will tell you, oh, well, you see, the ancients like to stack rocks as a form of contest, and blah, 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 blah. It's like, it's a lot of exposition.
Somehow they kept standing for 10,000 years.
Yeah. But, like, ultimately, like, if you look at the way how these two games end, the DLC ends with Eggman standing by the ocean, watching the meteorites fall throughout the atmosphere, and Sage is there. So, oh, cool, Sage is alive. And then you watch the ending for the original game, where Eggman is alone, but then he brings Sage back to life anyways.
Yeah.
Like, they both kind of end the same way. It's just how they get there is slightly different.
That's the thing. In the new campaign, the other characters are all more active. It's not just Sonic wailing on the final boss for a little bit and then Sage sacrificing herself. And this is where I'm conflicted, because there are some things about the vanilla campaign that I prefer, and I wish there'd be some way to like merge my favorite parts of both of them. But I do think the new campaign was worth it, because I think thematically it works to have, Sonic's friends jump in to help out, and for Eggman to have the giant gun and all that. I think it's great.
For Eggman to actually do something material to the conclusion of the story,
which felt good.
It ties everything together. Even like having more context for the ancients and getting to talk to some of them and getting some closure for them too. So much that was like left out of the vanilla game. Now we have the answers for it. They don't have to make like an entire second game to explain it all.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I just wish that they did more with it, because I kind of felt like as if a lot of it just kind of felt like exposition as opposed to like actually finding out like what these things mean organically.
Well, that's actually a big problem that I have with Frontiers as a whole that is only exacerbated by the DLC, is that a vast majority of the story content is people kind of just standing there talking to each other. And you could levy that complaint against a lot of Sonic games, but even in the ones where that happens sometimes, because inevitably a story, there are going to be points at which two characters are standing there talking to each other. It's just going to happen, But like the frequency with which this happens in Frontiers makes it so hard to be like actively engaged in what's going on, because and this is part of the reason why when I replayed the game, there were a lot of cutscenes that I just kind of skipped, because I would start the cutscene and I would realize that it's like
boring
Sonic's
as sin.
Asking Knuckles about like what that hill over there looks like, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't really know what's going on, or like.
Unfortunately, this is why like most of other recent games where characters stand around talking a lot, they also constantly gesticulate and pantomime the things they're saying. They're always waving their hands around. And it's because like the people animating the cutscenes are kind of bored because they got nothing to do, so they added all that flourish. In this game, they did not. So you do have the characters just standing around.
That's another thing too, is that animation-wise and in terms of like this ties into other issues that I have with the game generally, but like in terms of like style and how the game looks, it just is not doing these cutscenes any favors.
Yeah.
That
The animations are nothing special.
Yeah. And it's like, it's really hard for me to get invested in a lot of the cool stuff that does admittedly happen. Like when it gets to the point where there are cool things being shown to me, it is a little bit like, it's hard for me to get fully invested in that because like at the end of this DLC, there's some kind of theoretically cool shit happening, but it looks like shit, if I'm going to be frank.
But you're not Frank. You're Dan.
Well, Frank doesn't count.
and I guess that, like, in a large sense is why I don't really have the same kind of hype that a lot of people are bringing to the table. I wish I did. But to, like, bring it back to the characters, which I'm attempting to do, they are theoretically very interesting to me. But because they exist in a space where, like, I'm not having a lot of fun with the level design that they are interacting with, it kind of feels to me like how one appreciates, there are a lot of proof of concept, the things where like people will make an engine for a Sonic game and you can see Sonic and Shadow running around like a test field.
Yeah.
Like there was one that was like the one that I think Sonic Omens uses, maybe, where you can play as Sonic and Shadow in a boost thing.
I think it's like the Infinity Engine or something. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, the Infinity Engine is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It feels kind of like that in the sense of like you watch a video like that and you're kind of like, oh, that looks really cool. Shadow has some cool like air animations or whatever. Like there are a lot of things there that are theoretically very interesting. And I feel that way about how the characters play, where like Tails has his tornado fly and shit, and like for some reason he throws wrenches. I don't know what the obsession with that, where that stemmed from or where that was originated.
I will take it over dummy ring bombs.
Yeah.
At least it makes sense.
I mean, I don't like either of them, but whatever.
The tail swipe was better than both of them, yes.
Yes.
Anyway, there's stuff like that, and like Knuckles has a drill dive, I think, right?
Yeah.
There's like really cool stuff that you can do, but at the end of the day, because I don't really like what I am like, there's a bunch of floating shit in the sky, and it's like whatever. It didn't really bother me in the base game, but like in this one, there's just like the game already has pop-in issues. And when I'm flying around as Knuckles, trying to find something to interact with, and I am like, something pops into the screen, but then like a million things pop in with it, and I don't really know what to do with that information.
Where to
especially
start?
Because when you reach a tower, right, and then you climb to the top, you get like a strength seed, and then once you do that, you're kind of like, well, why the did I just do that? Like. There's like a lot of
beat
clashing.
The shit out of that Coco.
Yeah, like there's a lot of clashing interests, and so it ultimately ends up feeling like I'm just kind of on a deserted island playing around with Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
to kind of add on to what you're saying too, is that like it was already kind of distracting. Like the popping was pretty distracting in the base game, but then with the DLC, when you have like platforming challenges for so many characters. And they all just pop in all at once. And like the challenges themselves, like so many of them are just like cluttered and janky. And it doesn't feel
well,
good.
First of all, you have to figure out whether the character you're using can even interact with it, like Exo was saying.
Yeah.
Because they are color coded sometimes. But it's like, it's a little confusing sometimes where some of these platforming challenges will even lead, and some of them actually blend into other ones. There was a time that I was trying to climb a tower, and one of its segments like is connected to this random platforming section. So as I was climbing the tower, it like veered me off, and I thought I was still climbing the tower, but eventually I just ended up all elsewhere. It's like there's just a problem with like investment for me when there is so much floating around. I don't really know what the point of doing it all is, and very rarely do I find myself having the same sense of like raw fun that I had with Sonic f***ing around in like the first couple islands, you know?
It's
If I could
funny
also-
because go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to add on to like what King was saying too, because like he was saying to like, oh hey, he climbed a tower and he got like a seat of power, but like that's kind of the problem that I have in the sense where it's like, oh, you know, you have to go through these obstacle courses to get a single seat of power or to get like a single seat of defense or, you know, anything like that. And then you have the Starfall event where you have to run around and try to max out your seeds or your cocoa. And also you have like these new cocoa to find where they give you experience. And that's really
I will
because
say, I was just going to say, I do think they made some good compromises in that regard because you only have this one island to play as these characters. There are no like enemies to get XP from except the stupid bosses, which I just skipped. You're only gonna be able to play as them for so long. So they made it really easy to max out super quickly. Just, you know, with the meteor showers and the basically like free
But
stuff
then I guess
everywhere.
that's also part of the problem because the original game's foundation is the platforming sections are bridged together by memory tokens and shit like that. And
the problem
when
with
memory
this,
tokens are no longer part of the equation, lead into Ryan's point.
it is essentially what you're doing the entire time that you're playing as these characters. You're playing Ketchup. It's like even when you first get your hands on these new characters, it's like, you know, I remember like opening up the skill tree and at first being impressed. I'm like, oh wow, I thought there was only going to be like 2 or 3 attacks that they would have, but like it looks pretty expansive. But then it dawns on you, oh wait a minute, you can't even stomp, you can't even parry, you don't even have your basic attacks. That's all stuff that you have to do, like that's all stuff you have to grind for. So it's like, you know, you're playing as Knuckles, you're excited, oh hey, how's Knuckles going to play? Oh, you bump into Master Ninja Pro or Master Ninja Plus, and you have absolutely no means of fighting him. And then even then, when you do get your basic attacks, like Nick was saying, like there's no enemies to engage with. The only thing that is there are the bosses. Like the enemies are in the overworld to begin with, so that way you can try out your new combos and your new moves and everything like that, so you can get better as playing as Sonic.
Which are stupidly hard because they were spitefully designed.
It's like if you take away, like, the enemies were there, you know, for you to chew on, for you to practice with. So it's like, oh hey, now you got like a fully maxed out Knuckles, and you try to fight like the tower boss. You fucking can't because you have no way to like get the hang of that character. It's like that. It's cool that they have combat abilities,
kind of
but
like
you can't do anything with it.
The might seeds or whatever scattered around, right? You might say that like they're there so that you can level Knuckles, Amy, and Tails up to like fight bosses. But like, as somebody who did fight those bosses and watched other people fight those bosses, I have not seen a single person not use Sonic to fight those bosses. Because like, odds are Sonic is going to be maxed out by the time you play this DLC. Because he just went through an entire f***ing game's worth of leveling up.
Okay, I gotta ask, because I haven't checked myself. Are you able to go back to earlier islands?
No.
Well, that stinks. I wish they did have that kind of mechanic where you could just, you know, go back and forth between the islands once you've unlocked them. So any stuff that you didn't collect or any enemies you didn't fight the first time, I mean, think of how cool it would be if you could go back to Ares Island with Knuckles.
I'm kind of confused as to why they didn't do that.
Yes.
It should have at least,
because now they're like crammed into a DLC that feels like it's speed running the main progression of the main game.
There is something almost cathartic where like it can take so long to upgrade Sonic in the main game, and then it's this feeling of escalation, like, oh, now you're getting more goodies and you're getting them faster and faster because it's just that kind of game now. But I admit, it's just an illusion. It's, again, because you don't have very long to play as these characters, and that problem would be solved if they just let you keep playing as them. Even if it was after you defeated Supreme and after the credits played, if they just gave you a post-game where you could f*** around on any of the early islands with any characters that you wanted, that basically would be perfect. Why don't they let you do that?
I thought that's what they were going to do. I thought that would be like the completion rewards. Like, oh, now you could play as these characters like in the other open zones, but no.
Yeah, like, why don't they
Or
let you
even
do
just
that?
New Game Plus. There's New Game Plus now. And technically, if you have Hedge Mod Manager, you can do that.
But you shouldn't need a mod. You should be able to do that in the base game.
I know, yes.
I genuinely think this DLC would have been a lot better if they took the final island and split it up into 4 separate chunks and then have Knuckles, Sonic, Tails, and Amy have like their own dedicated parts of the island. So then that way you can design bosses and enemies made for those specific characters. And you can also design challenges and obstacle courses with those characters' movesets in mind. And that would also like get rid of the whole weird like direction or the lack thereof that this game had, or that the DLC had, where it's like, oh, I'm playing as Amy, oh, but then here's this thing that I can't do as Tails, here's this thing that I can't do because I have to be Knuckles, here's this thing I can't do because I have to be Sonic, oh, I can't fight this enemy because I'm too weak. If they just split it up and divided the sections equally amongst these characters, I think, it would have been a hell of a lot better. It would have been a lot more consistent that way. And maybe also that way you don't have to, like, worry about, like, power scaling or experience. Like, if you just let them be, if you give them just, like, the basics and design stuff around that, there you go. Because, like, we already explored this island before. Like, we already explored it in the base game. So, like, we already kind of know what to expect. And it's not like as if the layout is drastically different. It's pretty much the same. It's just that there's more junk all over the place. That's really it.
I do want to, on that note, agree with Nick that by the time you get to Uranos Island in the base game, it just kind of feels like a formality before the final boss, because there's not even the token story progression of the other islands, really.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm going to slightly disagree with whoever, I can't remember, I think it was you, Ryan, and say that I prefer this ending to the original one, because it does have sort of that Canon's Core flavor going on. And because the problem with the base game is the other characters spend the entire game coming to unmotivated epiphanies about themselves because they were trapped in a red balloon for 5 minutes. And then they don't really do anything except pull off a Deus Ex Machina to save Sonic.
Yeah, they held hands and wished upon a star.
Yeah. So, like, with this, it feels like a much better payoff to the earlier scenes with those characters, because they actually get to f***ing do something. Yeah.
I agree with you on, like, on paper, it's like on paper it should work, but in practice, like, in terms of, like, what they actually ended up doing, it's like, I think I would rather play through the final island as, like, in the base game than I would with this. Like, if this was the end game, like, if this was an expansion, like, this is how Sonic Frontiers actually ended, I would probably not be as favorable towards it. But the fact that this is, like, something you can, like, an optional thing that you can do, I'm not really so much, like, that bothered by it existing, because, like, if I don't want to do it, I don't have to do it.
I will say, with it being there, I do enjoy it. Like I said, when I played the base game, I basically skipped the last island. I just got the last collectibles I needed fishing with Big, and then I ended the game, because I felt like I'd seen everything the game had to offer already. And that's why I was so excited by, seeing the rest of the gang and getting all these new weird platforming, like floating block in the sky sections, because it was something more to do. It's like, okay, now it feels like this island has a point of being here. It just gave me something to do. That's why I do enjoy it.
Yeah, it's also
maybe
like,
that's just me.
I mean, it's not also like, I understand the why. Like, I get it. It's just not something that I like. It's just not something that I enjoyed. Like, if they can go back to the drawing board, like, they can, like, look at this and be like, okay, what worked, what didn't, and apply this to the next game, sure. And in that sense, I think it would work better. But I think, like, just what we have here, for me anyways, it didn't make the cut. I didn't really care for it.
Understandable.
What else is there to say about the playable characters, though? Does anyone else have anything to say?
I do want to talk about, like, the physical controls for each of them, because I have some gripes, but before we do, I did want to say, when we originally did our Frontiers episode, I think we were all pretty lukewarm on Amy and her involvement in the story, because, like, she doesn't have a crush on Sonic anymore, and that was basically her, well, if she does, she doesn't really mention it ever. So it just seemed like
tarot cards are a personality trait now.
Yeah.
Well, again, it wasn't even necessarily so much that she had a crush on Sonic. It was also just the fact that she didn't take shit from anybody. It's like she could be both, like, super nice and also, like, unhinged at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the part of the whole character design. It's like, oh, she's cutesy and dutesy, and also she has a giant hammer. She knows how to use it.
Yeah. So what I wanted to say was, having read the IDW comics now, not like the whole thing, but a decent chunk of them, and having seen how they present her in this DLC, I think I get what they're going for a lot more. In the comics, she makes, like, a token flirting with Sonic in like the first issue she shows up in, and then for the rest of it, she's pretty much all business. Because the idea is, while Knuckles was the commander of the Resistance, he was just kind of in it for the fun of it, and Amy was actually doing all of the logistical stuff to actually keep a Resistance running, and it sort of matured her. So she had like a real job essentially, while all the other characters were kind of f***ing around, and it led to her maturing. After seeing that, I kind of understood why she seems so much more mellow in this game. And then in the DLC, I felt like I think there's a part where after you get one of the Chaos Emeralds, she like yells at the end, which takes hours to come out of the sky for some reason. And she's like, I won't let you harm this world, you know. And I also want to say, I think I finally get what Cindy Robinson is going for in her performance as Amy, because like I said, I replayed Lost World recently, and she sounds like Minnie Mouse in that game.
Yeah.
Oh, stay calm, little guy. Sonic and Tails will get your buddies back. Sonic,
it'll be
did you get those animals back from Eggman?
It is not a good Amy performance, so I'm glad she's actually sounds palatable.
Ooh. All the cards are telling me is that things are obscured and danger approaches. I knew that already.
And her voice fits this older, more mature version of Amy in a way that like when I was reading the comics, I was imagining like the character voices talking, and I still hear Jason Griffith as Shadow. I can't imagine Kirk Thornton in that role at all. But it was Cindy Robinson's voice that I was hearing, and it works for that version of the character, and Amy Pallant or whoever, Jennifer Dooleyard, just don't work for this older version of Amy who's a little bit more mature, you know. And there was a moment where I think she was concerned about Coco and wanted to rescue a bunch of them that kind of reminded me of her rescuing the Blue Flicky in Adventure and like trying to defend it against Zero and stuff. That has been a character trait of hers to stand up for the weak and downtrodden. So
This is kind of a small tangent, but I have seriously considered deprogramming my English dub brain with Sonic and just switching entirely to Japanese so I don't have to be such a stick in the mud about it, because I just don't think I care for it anymore, the English dub direction.
Mm-hmm.
And since the Japanese dub is available and they have had the same actors for, well, sans Eggman for however many years, I'm honest to God might just do that with even a lot of my favorite old games, because I don't want to be the guy who every time a game comes out I have to in-depth explain like, yeah, I don't like these voices anymore. And I'm glad that a lot of people seem to think that the direction is getting better, including yourself, but I hate it. So next game comes around, I am playing in f***ing Japanese.
I think a good way to sum it up is the way Amy is written. Most of her dialogue is just really wet, namby-pamby stuff like, oh, I just hope that everyone's okay. It's so f***ing boring. And that's basically all she gets to do is say stuff like that.
I honestly think that I would be more okay with a lot of the lines if I just wasn't hearing them from the, like, and it is so hard to have voice actor discussions because, like, you have to be honest, but, you know, obviously people are saying these lines, and it's like, I mean, to a certain extent, you know, people make games, you're always talking about something that somebody created. And it's like, I really, really try my best not to come off like an asshole, but I don't like her performance. I don't really like most of these characters' performances. I think Tails is all right, but I think I've just come to a place where at this point I'm going to have to switch to the Japanese stuff because I can't do it anymore.
It's understandable.
Weep.
You know, honestly,
it's funny. Whenever somebody mentions like weebs, I just have this intrusive thought, like someone grabbing glowing sticks and going like, "Time to weeb out," and then Sandstorm starts playing.
I thought Ryan was saying weep with a P.
No, weep.
No, it's like hose mad kind of thing. No, like, yeah, personally, I disagree. Like, I think I've come around to Roger Craig Smith being just awful in Lost World, especially after playing this game. And going back to that, it's just
So high-pitched.
Hey, I've been looking for you, Baldy McNosehair. Who are your friends?
and then like he actually sounds like a real human being in this game, so I think he's gotten a lot better.
You are the key.
Key, huh? Sure beats being called a rodent. Are you saying I can rescue my friends?
Tear down the walls between dimensions.
Yeah, okay, sure. How about a little context? Hello?
But at the same time, I also replayed some Sonic 06 and Secret Rings this year, and I think Jason Griffith is just an abhorrent Sonic. I hate him.
Oh, hell no.
Look, you've talked about this before on the podcast, and it's funny. You said something that was almost word for word something that I also said, but independently. Like I hadn't seen that podcast, but he's the worst case of the 4Kids direction, where you have to over-enunciate every single syllable like this to keep the kids' attention.
So, is this what you usually look like?
Yeah, this is the real me. Pretty cool, huh? Huh? Where'd you go?
Yeah, I think honestly, if I hadn't grown up with Jason Griffith and he was happening right now, I don't know how I would feel about him, if I'm going to be honest. And that's part of the reason why I want to just deprogram my brain in that regard and just be stuck with a set group of actors that don't change all the damn time.
Yeah. Yeah, all I'm going to say is at least Roger Craig Smith can act. But moving on, let's talk about the controls.
I think Roger Craig Smith can act as well.
Yes.
Yeah, Roger Craig Smith is a great actor, but also so is Jason.
No.
Playtime's over.
Sonic!
This ship is about to crash. Too bad, Eggman.
Yes!
Now let's move on.
Okay, yeah.
Jason, I stand for you. Ignore Exo.
He was good as Shadow, and he was good as Sonic in Black Knight only. But what Nick told me is that he got acting lessons before Black Knight, and that's why he sounds a million times better in that game. But that was also his last game, so...
You know, it's really funny if you go back to the first 2 episodes of Sonic X, where you can tell everybody is doing their best impression of the previous actors. Jason Griffith trying to sound a little more like Ryan Drummond. Mike Pollock trying to sound like Dean Bristow before they eventually gave up and did their own thing. Anyway, what was the next thing you want to talk about, Exo?
Because I have some gripes.
Cyberspace?
No, I want to talk about how they f***ed up Knuckles and made him horrible. Oh my god. Where to even begin?
Okay, when he's climbing, and anytime you touch a non-climbable surface, he loses his grip and slides a bit. I don't see why that's necessary. Why can't he just, stop, like in the adventure games?
And also, when he was climbing around, and I realized this too, because, with the default speed stat, his climbing is slippery but manageable, but if you upgrade that to 99, then it's like he's slipping around like butter in a frying pan on these walls, and it just doesn't make any sense. He's climbing. It shouldn't be this slippery. And, I'm legitimately curious if the designers and programmers for this DLC actually played Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 before making these characters. Specifically for Knuckles, because I don't know how you can go back and play the treasure hunting stages, whatever you want to say about them. At the very least, Knuckles controlled pretty well. He was pretty fast, the gliding was really responsive, the climbing felt pretty good. The Dreamcast analog stick is a little overly sensitive, but that's kind of the worst of it. And then you go over to this, and it's for some reason, there needs to be a full second delay every time you glide. Every time you do a ground pound or a stomp, there needs to be a full second windup. When you're gliding, it needs to be like the Zelda glider, where you can barely steer yourself at all. But
look, I know why they do stuff like that. It's to give those animations a feeling of oomph. This is going to be a really heavy ground pound. Here we are winding up. I don't know. They think that extra half second will give you some, anticipation and make it more satisfying. But it's just annoying because it just makes it take long.
Yes, it interrupts the flow of the gameplay. And it's like Sonic doesn't need a full second delay when he stomps. Amy doesn't have a delay, but Tails and Knuckles both have a delay for their stomps. And it's like...
It's close enough that I feel like they must be familiar with how those characters play an adventure. They brought back like basically every attack they had in those games. Even some from Sonic 06, it feels like.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they were just watching a Let's Play, like if they were just watching Clement play it, or if they actually sat down and did it themselves.
Yeah. Like, I think of all the things, I hate the delays, but the fact that the glide is so undersensitive is to me the most unforgivable thing. Because, like, could you imagine trying to play the treasure hunting stages in the adventure games if the glide functioned that way? Could you imagine? Like, it would be...
I'm not sure.
It would be, like, borderline unplayable. And maybe I'm exaggerating, but I have no idea what they were thinking and why more people aren't talking about this. Like, all the people who were super hyped for the final boss in Super Sonic 2, why aren't they talking about how awful the glide is?
I don't know. I found it mostly manageable when I was, basically flying over the island. But the second that I had to make an acute turn, I would overshoot. Or I'd have to, like, drop out of the glide and then try to glide again or something.
Mm-hmm.
That was annoying. I will say, however, one of the highlights of the DLC for me, one of my favorite moments, was that giant cube that you crawl around the inside of. It's that one place that people were screenshotting to show like how unnatural it looks, in this realistic setting. But honestly, I love the level design inside that cube. Just going from wall to wall, navigating what looked like one of Escher's paintings, or sketches, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just me.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm going to agree with you. If I have to give my positives for Knuckles, if you get over how he controls, the actual level design they gave for him was pretty good and used his unique mechanics well. Like, I really wish Knuckles could just climb on anything, especially since this is an open world game and that'd actually be really useful, but can't for some reason. But for his dedicated platforming sections, there were some really interesting, like, you gotta glide to another wall opposite the camera, and the camera was fairly cooperative since you control it yourself. And try to figure out where you can glide to from where. And I really did like his infinite glide. Like, if you get up onto a high enough area of the open world and you just glide, you can, like, soar across the whole map. And that was kind of fun. But yeah, between the slippery climbing and the terrible glide and the fact that he is constantly falling off the wall because he's touching something he can't climb on and he just drops like a rock.
And that he has no normal enemies to punch.
Yeah. Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric might be worse, but as far as, like, the mainline games, I think this is the worst that 3D Knuckles has ever played.
Man.
Do you disagree?
Yeah. I'd say Base 06 was worse, but yeah.
Yeah, like, I'll be clear, even though I do think Knuckles is very flawed, I don't think he's horrible to play as. I think he's alright. But, I don't know, maybe I adjusted to the bullshit so fast that I barely even noticed it was happening to me. Which I guess isn't an excuse.
But thankfully, the other two characters are much better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I would say
I liked the tornado.
Yes, the tornado is fun.
You can fire the laser.
Yes, which is a reference.
Oh, and even, look, I'm sorry, everybody knows that you can fly and that it transforms that way. And when you're firing a laser, it stands in its two-legged form. But if you boost along the ground, it converts into a car.
Huh. Okay,
really?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you, like, push down, so, you're pressing against the ground. Instead of flying, it'll, the wheels will come out and you'll just roll along like Gamma.
Oh,
Yeah. I thought Amy was the best of the three characters. Like, her controls felt the most polished. I really missed the hammer, and I'm kind of annoyed that... Because, like, what I recall of the whole tarot card thing is that it was mentioned once in the manual of Sonic CD, and then, like, 20 years later it showed up in Sonic Origins, and that was kind of it. So I don't know why they're so overemphasized in her moveset for some reason, but that's a nitpick. It's like hitting people with cards or a hammer. I mean, I guess the hammer would have more interesting feedback, but whatever, you don't fight anything with her anyway because the bosses are way overpowered.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the platforming goes, I like that they brought the triple jump from 06 back. I liked the glide. I liked her Sonic Lost World style multi-lock-on thing. Yeah, I mean, I guess she's not great, but she played well. And that's kind of the difference between her and Knuckles, is Knuckles has more interesting mechanics, but he's programmed and controls like crap. So, and Tails I liked. Aside from his stomp and his flying having a full second delay, I thought he was pretty good.
Yeah.
I just, look, I can appreciate them giving him a ranged attack, and they build a lot of sections around being able to throw things, but I miss also being able to hit things with his tails. The thing that he is known for.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
And if I do have another nitpick of him, I understand why he doesn't have a homing attack. And frankly, I don't understand why Knuckles has one either, because he's never had one. But it does make him harder to use in the seed platforming sections that hypothetically anyone can play. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but if you try to jump into one of those pulley string things that pull you upwards, like, it's really hard to get Tails to grab onto those things. Like, the collision is really tiny on it, which is fine if you're playing as a character with a homing attack, but Tails doesn't have one. So, ironically, the character who's best for platforming is only really good for the sections that are built for him because of that. But I don't know, it's okay. I can live with it. Yeah, any other observations about how the characters play?
I've got nothing.
Not really. I'm just glad that they're back and that they were.
I think
that they were pulled off as well as they were.
It's really weird that they have a Donkey Kong 64 like character selection process.
Yes.
I think that is a strange decision, to say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should just be able to press a button and change them like in Sonic Heroes. At least the second time you go around the island with them. Oh well.
What would have been a good compromise is if you could go to any one of those map signs to change characters, because at least they're everywhere, so you don't have to go all the way up to the north part of the island and climb the tower just to switch. Because, like, I think the idea is, and I know this for a fact because I had the shortcut hack enabled for my second playthrough, is that you could totally break the towers in half, especially if you can switch characters on the fly, and the platforming sections as well, so that's probably their thought process. But, even Donkey Kong 64 had multiple character switching barrels in every level. It wasn't at the top of a tower. So,
the top of the final tower.
Yes. So let's talk about cyberspace.
Let's talk about the final tower.
Sure, let's talk about the towers in general. Let's talk about all that stuff.
Okay, look, to sum up quickly, there were 2 that I was able to climb easily enough. But one's like with the fans that you gotta fling yourself with just the right trajectory. The other ones, I just could not beat them without easy mode, which again, throws in lots of extra balloons and stuff and springs that you can homing attack on, which basically just turns into standard Sonic level design. But gosh, I pity anyone who had to go through those the normal way.
Oh, I did.
I did. I beat all of them legitimately.
If I'm going to be honest with you, the towers did not give me that much problem. I mean, I think they were probably the most fun I had during the DLC.
Really?
So,
I guess
that means anything to anybody.
For me, the problem is it's just my anxiety. The threat of having to repeat an entire section makes me so jittery that my hands get shaky, and it's just hard for me to do the simple act of pushing buttons to play the game, which I guess is just a me problem. Like in Sonic Superstars, when I got to the end of Trip's campaign, the final boss, Fang. Oh my god. Yeah, the second phase with this giant robot, it actually isn't that bad. Even with all the insta-kill attacks, it's a pretty fun fight. The problem is, there's that constant threat of having to repeat the first phase. Just 4 minutes or more of Simon Says, waiting for Knack to throw rockets at you, waiting for him to make his death laser spinny things, waiting for him to, go up and that. But the point is, the stress of knowing that I'm gonna have to go through all that over again, just to try again against that second phase, made it unbearable for the over 3 hours that I was stuck on it. And that's basically how it is for these towers or something like that boss rush. It's just that anxiety from the ever-present threat that you're gonna have to do it all over again. That ends up making you.
I got that during the boss rush.
Yeah, it ends up
definitely got that during the boss rush.
It ends up making you screw up more and have to go through it all again.
My whole thing with the towers. I mean, Sonic Frontiers, I will defend this game. I like it a lot. I can admit that, yes, it is a very janky game. But at the same time, like regarding the vanilla game, it doesn't really ever ask you to do anything too extreme. Like the level design is never so airtight. Like there's a lot of room for error. There's a lot of leeway, right? So in a sense, it's pretty forgiving. So then you climb these towers and some of these are like making you do like these super precise jumps or these super airtight maneuvers and everything. That's when the jank really starts to show, and that's when the game feels genuinely worse. I did not have fun climbing these towers because like that's when all of the jank and like all of like the weird little issues just kind of pile on and they become like the most apparent when it's like asking you to do things that like the game did not ever really prepare you to do. So I
guess the paradigm shift for me is that I dealt with that jank the whole game, so it was just another Tuesday.
The day that M. Bison came to your village was the worst day of your life, but for me it was Tuesday.
Yeah.
This is going to be a rare instance where King and I seem to be on the same page. I enjoyed the towers for the most part, but I hated the fourth one with the fans. That one made me want to do...
No, yeah, there's a part in that one that was kind of bullshit.
It's like...
I'll agree with that.
Right near the top, like you have to get like a quick side loop on some things.
Well, I remember that. That's the only one I remember, and it's because of that.
Yeah.
Like, vividly, I remember that section. I was like, oh yeah.
Well, there's also one where it's like you have to get on this grind rail that's like a circle, and then you have to like boost and then jump to land on another grind rail that is also a circle. But like you can also clip through the rail, and it's like, oh, so now I have to do it all again.
This is what I'm saying, right? Yeah, that stuff happens, but that like that was happening to me through the whole game. So it's like, yeah, I guess it's a problem, but that extends to the whole game for me. I don't know.
Like in the base game, I never really noticed it that much. Because again, it's like, okay, yeah, if you fell through, there's usually something to catch you. Like there was always something.
Generally, I think were the buggiest thing that I encountered in the base game. Like trying to switch rails, going too fast on rails. It often felt like they had no idea how fast you could use those things.
You know, what these games really need is the ability to turn around on a rail. Because, like, it seemed like half the time I'd land on a rail, I'd go in the wrong direction. And then I'd have to try to awkwardly jump and spin myself around and land back on the rail. Like, if you could just tap left stick to flip around and it slowed you down, that would solve the problem right there. So, I don't know why that's not in the game. Yeah, but I did want to bring this up, is that when the original game came out, there was a lot of discussion about automation. I think Jay even made a whole video about it.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, replaying the base game, there are a lot of rails in this game in general. And I mean that literally, where like most of they're fairly emphasized in the memory token challenges and even in the cyberspace levels to an extent. And it's just kind of a way of creating a safety net for lesser experienced players, I guess, so that you get the satisfaction of going fast and feeling like a speed demon without the risk of, you know, falling off of a platform and yourself as often. It's kind of the difference between this game and the later stages in Sonic Unleashed. Or like Sonic Unleashed is a game where it's really easy to kill yourself because the controls are kind of not very good. Whereas this game, there's a lot of automation in it, and it did make it I did notice it more on the second playthrough. So I guess that is something that they did address in this update, like even in the cyberspace levels, is that you have more direct control over your character than you do in the base game. Which is, I suppose, what made these towers kind of fun is, like, I totally agree with you, Nick, that there should be some checkpoints and an ability to pick up from an area so that if you die on a really tricky part, you don't have to redo the entire tower.
That's the funny thing is it's not even just dying, it's having to wait and watch as you fall all the way back down.
Yes, but I did think that even in the cyberspace levels in this, there's some really interesting uses of platforming that they haven't done probably since 06 or maybe Rise of Lyric. I don't really remember that game that well.
It's because they're more confident. That's one thing I noticed is, yeah, there's a lot more automation in the early game, but even the more recent stuff that has been added to those earlier islands it's less automated. And that tells me that, you know, they're taking the training wheels off, or the guardrails rather, because they are putting more faith in the players. That's why, like, so much stuff was so automated for so many years, was because people would screw up somehow, and then they would blame the game. And they would say the Sonic is just badly designed. The Sonic was never good. So they put in all those guardrails to ensure that nothing would go wrong and people couldn't get mad. But now, they're taking those guardrails off and they're getting a lot more bold with the level design. Now it's like, it's not just the things they're asking you to do, it's the things you can do. You know what I mean?
Well, I figure that we should talk about that boss rush. Because that's an inevitable topic.
The most annoying part is that you have to approach the bosses the same way every time, which isn't so bad with 1 and 3. But with Wyvern, of course, you gotta go up the tower, and then you gotta make it through the entire section where you're following it, which takes like an extra 3 minutes. They should have just skipped that and started you with the actual boss fight.
Yeah, and they didn't do that because they're sneaky little because it's like, oh hey, you only got 400 rings to start. And if you get hit during any of the climbing sequences, you're out of luck. Try again, asshole.
It's like they want you to lose some, just so it's that much harder.
I remember I was on Wyvern for a while. And then I finally beat him, and then I get to Knight. And Knight is already pretty janky. And he was just standing there. I take one step forward, and then this guy is spinning around like an asshole. Spikes come out of nowhere, and then I only had like 30 rings left because I got hit. I was livid because I had to do it all over again. And then that's when I decided
that's a deep lore callback right there.
Easy mode is your friend.
That's when I discovered easy mode, and I'm like, oh? And then I put it on easy mode, and then I beat it on my first try.
I tried to do this on either normal or hard. It might have been hard. So I think the game was just set to hard, because that's how you get the true ending.
Yeah.
And so I was trying it on that for a very, very long time. And then eventually I was just like, okay, well, I guess switching it to easy increases your parry timing. So I switched it to easy, and immediately I won.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like when Goku does the training weights on his way to Namek. It's like when you play it on hard over and over and over again, the discrepancy between the time that you get to react in hard and easy mode doesn't sound like a lot on paper, but it is like night and day.
Yeah, and on hard mode, it's frame perfect, but on easy mode, you get almost a second and a half to react to things.
Yeah.
It's great.
Because it still technically works the same way in that as long as you're holding the button down, you have a few seconds for that to work. Mm-hmm. So all you really have to do is get a little bit of a better feel for when the animation comes out, but then hold the button down in advance. You can still do that. You just have to be a little more tactical about it, and then I instantly beat it. But let me tell you, playing on hard mode revealed how those fights were designed without a perfect parry in mind. I mean, obviously, because the perfect parry was never a thing. And it gets into a thing of people criticized the fact that the parry, you could just sit there and hold it. But and I'm one of those people, because it just kind of seemed weird to have a parry if it wasn't a parry. But also, trying to fix it like this, to me, is an unhinged decision. I do not understand the logic there. They're like, oh yeah, okay, so the parry's broken. Here you go. And it's
this is what you wanted, right?
Yeah, it's okay, so you're now going to ask me in a game that has never, ever asked me to perfect parry. You are now going to ask me to perfect parry within a frame window on hard mode against bosses that you never had to care about it with.
Also, please tell me I'm not the only person here who realized immediately that Wyvern is just 3D Doomsday Zone.
Well, that's pretty much what Mother Nega-Wisp was, wasn't it?
I'm afraid I haven't played the DS Sonic Colors.
Yeah. And so was the forward camera parts of the Time Eater, if I recall.
I guess, but here, you're bouncing the missiles back at him. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. I think I may have had the hardest time with this boss rush of all of us because I suck at video games.
Hey, wait a minute.
Well, you're called Ryrule now. It doesn't matter. For anybody who doesn't realize, 100 years ago, Ryan used to be called the Ryan Sucks at Video Games channel.
Trademark.
The second time I played this, I guess another observation I want to make, Nick, is that I totally get where you're coming from not really having a good sense of how to time a perfect parry in like a traditional character action game, as people call it now. But I do want to note that even in those games, if you're guarding when something hits you, you take less damage, unless if it's like a guard break move, which you're supposed to dodge. Usually most games have a dodge and a guard, and then there are specific types of attacks that you're supposed to use both responses for. Even the new Ass Creed game has that. And like usually if you just hold the thing, you won't parry them, but you won't take damage either. And that's not in this game. All you have is like, the actual parry thing, which makes it even weirder that they react so violently to you just standing there raising your everything-proof shield during the boss battles. Whereas with this, you're being punished for not being perfect, which isn't even in any of those types of games. So
this is actually harder than those types of games are even.
Yes. Even in like God of War 2 has a pretty prominent perfect parry system with the Golden Fleece.
Mm-hmm.
And even that has a much more generous timing to it than this game does. Like, they got really ridiculous with how specific it is. And I think Elise Mango Milk managed to do it on hard, but I couldn't be asked. I went down to easy mode as well, and when I replayed the game, I just turned on a mod that changed it to like 2 seconds. And there's a 1 second version of the mod as well, which might be a good compromise for you guys, where it's like, it's specific enough that you have to time it, but not so specific that, you're running into issues with the lag on your TV.
If I ever play it again, I'll use the 2 second mod. I don't give a
Yeah.
These bosses were never designed for it.
Yes.
Like, fighting Wyvern, there are some attacks Wyvern has where I have no clue where his hitbox attack thing is.
Yeah.
Like, it's incredibly, like, unintuitive. It's crazy.
Yeah, totally agreed. And I completely agree with Nick's observation about the forced runner section before Wyvern, and there are all the unskippable cutscenes and QTEs. It's like it was deliberate.
Going through that once is fine, but going through it on the boss rush? No.
Yes, it feels like it was deliberately designed to be malicious. That's how it comes off.
That's what I said.
Like, it feels like Kishimoto and his designers were sitting around a table and it's like, what can we do to really piss them off? And I'm sure that's not really what happened, but that's how it comes across.
400 rings is too many.
Yeah. I don't know how you design something this annoying by accident, unless you didn't test it at all. That was just how I felt about it. It was easier the second time when I knew the precise exact string of movements I was supposed to do for these bosses. Like, the optimal strat is get up close to them, spam the sonic boom until your Psyloop gauge fills up, attack them once, and then press X to do a Psyloop around them to lock them up. Then you do double damage, and then you use the Psyloop again to make them fall back to the ground so you don't have to wait. But even then, sometimes I'd do a Psyloop and it just wouldn't register, especially in f***ing Wyvern. Wyvern only gets Psylooped when it feels like it. And the same thing happens with Knight. And also with Knight, there's that thing where you're just supposed to know that if you sidestep while it's raising its shield, you could target its head, which you have to know for the final boss as well, but the game just never tells you that that's a thing you can do, as far as I remember. And I've seen all the tutorials. This might be a wrong moment, but I don't care.
Well, they had to sidestep in order to target the thing for the end?
Yes.
No, that is... You're right on the money.
Yeah. So that boss rush sucked.
I do want to say one thing about the boss rush, though. I just kind of like want to add like a little tidbit here, where it's like, 'cause like I remember when this was fresh and people were saying like, "Oh, now can we admit that the Titan fights sucked and that they were never good?" And I'm like, no, because it's just like you're fighting these bosses with a mechanic that they were not designed for.
Yeah.
These fights with the perfect parry, they aren't good, and it's not like as if the Titan fights were like something on the level of God of War or Devil May Cry or anything like that, but they're meant to be over the top, super crazy, balls to the wall action. I don't really think they're meant to be super difficult. They're just supposed to be fun and entertaining.
They're a victory lap. They're the payoff for making it through the Island.
And not to say that I think they're boo-boo baby easy. Like, they can be pretty hard, but like, it's not really the point, if that makes any sense. It's like they have a job, they have a purpose, and they do that purpose very well.
I will say,
I'm sorry, Nick.
the last one, Supreme as the end, I thought it was great. Yes, it is annoying that you have to switch targets by just like nudging against it enough. But even with that, I think the boss fight was just the right length. It had like just the right amount of hype moments. I think the challenge, was pretty decent considering that, he can attack your teammates and stuff like that. I like the attacks. And what else? Yeah, I love that you had to pick up the gun and fire it back at him. And even with all of that, I like how whether you go in there with 400 rings or 999, that doesn't necessarily make the boss fight easier, because towards the end of it, it balances things out by taking away all of your rings except your last 100. And then you have that window to just wail on it and finish it off.
Yeah,
so it's pretty balanced.
If we could talk about the final boss for a bit,
sure,
before we talk about cyberspace.
Yeah.
I only say that because I know Exo doesn't like cyberspace, but we'll cross the road when we get there. I liked the fight with Cybersonic, but this felt like phase 2 in a 3-phase boss. It felt like as if it was missing a final phase. It's like you fight Supreme, and then you fight Supreme with the moon. But like, I think there needed to be, and Nick, you were also kind of talking about this a little bit too, where it's like, there's like some things that you like better in the vanilla, some things you like better in the DLC. I'm kind of the same way, where it's like, I think that there needed to be a fight with the end. And I liked the premise in the vanilla game where it's like, it's Sage and Sonic teaming up, and they're taking on the end that way, and you gotta fly around in space. Like, the thing that I always thought is like, okay, well, maybe we could do something like, something in the style of the final boss for Sonic Unleashed, where it's like, at first you control the Titan, and like you're shooting the end with like a giant gun, and then after that you get to play as like Cybersonic. Like, that would have been cool.
Look,
but it just ends.
I think an easy way to do it, without like making a ton of new assets or new gameplay style, is just have another Wyvern fight. Have it take place in space against the end, and it literally being Doomsday Zone in 3D. Yeah. I think that would have been a good way to add to it, because the Ikaruga section, it really does just come out of nowhere.
And it sucks.
And I admit, while fighting the end itself is fun enough, I do also appreciate just it like dominating the sky. Like, no, you can't fight that, but here's something you can fight. It's basically coming down to your level. There's something I appreciate about that too.
I think it's personally kind of weird how much they focus on like what they dub in the game files as Supersonic 2, but technically we don't have a name for as of yet.
They actually call it Supersonic 2?
Well, it's labeled that in the files. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what it's called, but like, because they don't really call it anything in the game, but it is clearly like a powered up supersonic transformation where his eyes change a different color. I find it odd how much focus was placed on that when there's also like a cyber corruption thing that he has that is still just in a cutscene for a few seconds.
Yeah,
it would be cool if you could play
that.
Because, look, here's the thing. I know people wanted to see Hypersonic or Darkspine Sonic or something, but no, they had to come up with a form for this game that was, it's like the will of the ancients channeled through you. It's resolving their story. That's the significance of it. Something like Hypersonic wouldn't be thematically appropriate here. That said, it's just Supersonic with differently colored eyes and a red aura. So, yeah Cybersonic, that's more clearly, tied into everything else in the game. So if that was Supersonic 2, I think, and you could, use that form in the fight, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, because the only real difference gameplay-wise, for lack of a better term, Supersonic 2, is that his parry is worse.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that I unlocked Supersonic 2, and you get the text box, right? And I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, cool. My parry's worse. Like,
I'm glad I spent 6 hours climbing those towers and being a stupid boss rush to this to make my parry worse.
Well, and that's like, it's kind of an emblematic moment for me, where I'm like, I look at this DLC and its attempts to like quote unquote fix everything, and like, it doesn't really feel like it fixed as much as it kind of, like, in some ways, it added moments for characters that they didn't have, where they, in the original, like, the story kind of just stopped happening at the end.
Yeah.
Like, I guess it fixed it in some ways, but it also just kind of feels like a weird, random alt ending. Like, and that's one of the reasons why, is like, the cybersonic form was something I thought was just a shoo-in. Like, it felt like something they were coding into the game in the original. Like, they were laying the pieces down that Sonic was going to get, like, the cyber corruption was going to mean something, but then somewhere along the way, they were like, we don't really have time to do that, so let's just kind of end his cyber corruption immediately. But now it feels like, yeah, they gave him a cyber corruption form, but, like, for marketing sake, or like, I don't know, they were like, well, we'll just do Supersonic 2. And Cyber Corruption Sonic is still in a cutscene, even though I feel like my big problem with the final boss is that it just kind of feels like the end, but like he has weird, wacky Bloodborne animations and he like crawls on the ground. Like, it's very strange, and it leaves me feeling conflicted about both endings of the game, and that is just kind of weird.
I'll personally just say I love, its animation stuff. That the idea that it's gone completely feral because it's possessed by the end's weird energy. Like, one of the most horrific details I noticed was that its legs are now bent backwards so it can have that posture. I think it's a big enough change. It's kind of like the different forms of Dark Gaia for people who like Dark Gaia. I'm one of them. I don't know. I like how quickly the demeanor of it changed.
Mm-hmm. As for me, like, I know you were saying that you thought it was decently challenging, Nick. That's where the boss rush actually works against the game. Because
the boss rush is so balls hard.
Well, the boss rush teaches you to spam Sonic Boom to fill up your Psyloop gauge, Psyloop the boss, and then spam Sonic Boom, because while you're doing it, the enemy can't move, and you could melt their health bar really fast. And if you do that on this final boss, he won't even have an opportunity to hit the other characters making the shield. Then all that's really left of the boss is the obscure parts where you're just supposed to know you could sidestep to hit the healing cord thing, and that you're supposed to quick Psyloop the gun twice so that Eggman can grab it. And then, like, part of me kind of appreciates the tension of having most of your rings get sucked away. But the first time I was playing that boss, it was just kind of like, oh, come on. I've drained your health bar like 3 times now. Why are you still alive?
Look, I'll just say, look, the cord, they should have made an easier way to attack it, because I think it's pretty obvious, seeing essentially an umbilical cord connected to the end. I think most people will put together, oh, I gotta cut that. It's just that they don't make it easy to do that, unfortunately. They don't make it easy to change targets. Like, there isn't a mechanic to do that. That's the problem with that part. As for the gun, having to Psyloop that to pick it up, I think that's perfectly fine, because it's a thematic callback to Night, where, you see that cutscene where Sonic Psyloops the sword. It's like, hey, if he could Psyloop the sword, maybe I can Psyloop this gun.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, that was also my train of thought.
It's a full circle moment.
I understood it when it's like stuck in the ground that was what you're supposed to do, but when it's on his back, it wasn't something.
That's another thing. They should have made it more apparent that you could switch to that target, because really, like, there are 3 targets on the end. There's his head, there's the cord, and then there's the hole on his back. I wish there had been like extra reticles, or how to pronounce it.
Reticle?
Basically, I wish there were extra targets on those parts.
Mm-hmm. To kind of conclude, it just felt like this final boss was making itself up as it went along, which I suppose you could argue is true for the other Titans as well, but to me it felt like a lot more difficult to figure out, whereas I could figure it out even Supreme and Night right away when I played the game the first time. So I know it was kind of cool to have all the characters play into that final boss and actually get to do something in the climax, but other than that, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I preferred the Ikaruga boss fight.
I understand. I guess, look, that first playthrough, having to figure everything out, that is a little rough. But if I just, turn on the game and pick up the controller right now, I think it's a really fun fight. And I think it might be the best balanced out of all of them. Partly, because of like at the end, I know it's hard to tell what I'm saying when I say the end.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been going for a while, so let's quickly wrap up with cyberspace stages.
Okay,
Yes.
Yeah, so, cyberspace I did not like in the original, and to nobody's surprise, I don't like it here either. So it just has all the same problems, but with stranger things in them. I'll say.
season?
Some very... Shut the... I can't believe you do this to me.
Are people? Is someone going to play master puppets on the roof of a house in this game?
Mustard, mustard, mustard and ketchup, I'm putting it on. On my hot dog, it hits a foot long. The ketchup is empty, I need a new one. But don't grab me mayo, cause that's just wrong. Mustard, mustard.
No, there's just some, so my original problems with Cyberspace was, they're not original level themes. There is an in-baked excuse for it, but I just think, at this point, I'm done with this bullshit. Come on. Stop f***ing doing this.
Please. Sega, make some new, Sonic Team, make some new assets.
Yeah.
Why are Sonic's memories consisting of 3 locations? What is wrong with his head?
The exact same 3 locations that happen to be in Generations that we have a pile of assets already made for? That's awfully convenient.
That's the problem with original Cyberspace. It's a problem here too. Whatever. They're using the same levels, so I can't really fault them. Whatever. The bigger problem for me is that beyond anything else that was going on in the original levels, where I mostly disliked the 2D ones, to their credit, I think all of these are 3D.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think, which is nice. There are some levels where you can use you can abuse the spin dash and stuff, and it's kind of cool.
They're trying to be they're trying to be Sonic Adventure-esque level design.
Yeah, there's a chemical plant level that I think that I enjoyed. It had a lot of ramps, but if I am ever going to go for the side in these levels, because that sounds horrible. No.
Am I the only one who did it all?
The first time I encountered the carrying a flicky on your back, I was like, what in the is this? What is actually happening right now? There's a bunch of stuff like that. It's just weird. There's a level where you get rocket boost, which I got the rocket boost, and I was like, oh, this seems kind of cool. But then most of the level is you just hold down rocket boost and Sonic goes on a linear track, and you don't really even have to do anything. You just kind of sit there, hold the rocket boost, and you rocket boost through enemies so hard that it looks like the game's about to crash. I don't know. It doesn't really, and this is the thing with Frontiers as a whole for me, is that I load into levels like this and it feels like I really, really, really try my best not to be mean when I say things like this, but it reminded me of what you'd see in that weird Sonic Roblox game sometimes. I don't really know what's happening. There's just a bunch of, they took the same cyberspace levels, they threw a bunch more on top of it. There's this level where there's cars for miles, the same car model, and I'm like, what is
And it's lower gravity, so it's you're basically supposed to. It's like Cosmic Wall.
It's just fucking weird, and I don't even know. It's just I don't currently feel like I understand what they're cooking. I just don't get it, and I hope that by the next time that I'm playing a Sonic game, I do get it. And that's that in a nutshell.
I think what they're cooking is in an RV out in the Arizona desert.
Yeah, that's how I feel sometimes, yes.
I like most of the cyberspace levels. I think they're inoffensive, they're short, they don't interrupt the rest of the game much. By the last few islands, I barely even touched them.
Mm-hmm.
They're nothing special.
I got some things to say about cyberspace.
I'm just going to say, by the way, that because I know this conversation is going to be a lot, I have to disappear now. So,
okay.
Fare thee well, King.
Later. I actually don't have much at all to say about cyberspace that I haven't already. I got
some things to say about cyberspace. I got some fun fun thing. So I'm a paint a little bit of a picture here, if you don't mind. So in the previous Sonic Frontiers podcast that we did, I said that the cyberspace stuff in the vanilla game, I genuinely feel this. Like, I felt it back then. I feel it now, despite the updates. Like, the spin dash, the power boost, some of the tweak physics. It helped cyberspace, but it didn't make it better, right? Cyberspace felt like some of the worst Sonic content in years. I genuinely thought it was terrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the reasons, I don't want to, be that guy, but for the reasons, go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. But I couldn't stand it. And the kind of weird dichotomy that I had was that I genuinely thoroughly enjoyed the majority of the open zone stuff. And I very much disliked the cyberspace stuff. Here comes the Final Horizon, right? And I was honestly kind of flabbergasted that they had cyberspace, because it's kind of pointless here. This in cyberspace, you do the extra missions to get the lookout Coco, but you can find them everywhere in the overworld, right? So I beat my first time playing through the Final Horizon, I did not do a single cyberspace level. Not a single one, because I didn't need to. I already unlocked all the towers. I was set, right? So I actually had to go back and find them myself. And the weird thing with the Final Horizon is that, the overworld stuff, I genuinely did not really enjoy. I didn't really care for a lot of it. I fucking loved the cyberspace. I fucking loved it.
I knew you were going to say that.
Do I think it was good? Probably not. But you could break these stages like a goddamn Kit Kat bar. You could break these stages in half. You are Bane. The levels are Batman. It is great. It is so much fucking fun. And what I liked about them, for one, yes, there are optional things to do, like getting the silver medals, getting the little numbers, finding the flickies. Are they fun to do? No. But, but the way how they are placed in the context of the levels, you cannot get all things in one go unless if you play through these levels multiple times that you understand them. But, a lot of times you are going to be able to do that. They're placed in out of the way spots. So you actually have to kind of explore, and you have to stop what you're doing to figure out hey, where is everything? How can I get everything? That wasn't the case in the original game. In the original game, you could run in a straight line, you get everything and you're done. So there was no need to replay these levels. And also with the original game, it's the majority of them were just levels from previous games. And they also didn't feel as good. That kind of is true here, but they also added just some extra little nugget of bullshit where it's oh, now you have to race Tails. Oh, you got a bomb strapped to your back. You better get going, buddy. Oh, you better watch out because there are invisible mines all over the place. You don't want to bump into one. Whenever I loaded inside one of these cyberspace stages, I had a grin on my face the entire time because I was excited to see what they were going to do. It was a thrill. I loved it. They weren't great, but they were so much fucking fun. King was talking about the level with all the cars. I played through that level so many fucking times. Not because it was too hard, but because I was genuinely having fun. Just going off a ramp and just skipping through the entire level, going all the way, looking for the hidden exit. One thing I do genuinely like is that now they're hidden exits. I like that. And I want to see that come next game. I think that's genuinely really good, right? But I'm just saying, I don't know. These delighted me. They tickled me. And sometimes, I'm not going to lie, I pop the game on my PS5, and sometimes I just play through them again. And I don't even go after the extra I just play through it and look for the optional exit. I love it. I'm sorry. Oh, Exo, carry us away. Oh. Your turn.
I don't even know how to respond to all of that. Okay, here are some things I'm going to grant you. Like King said, the whole thing is 3D. There's no 2D sections in any of these levels.
Yeah.
Also, like you said, in these levels, you could spin dash off of ramps and just get insane distance. And that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. And I would say that in terms of like sheer level design, just in terms of like the actual layouts of platforms and stuff, this is a noted improvement over the levels from the base game, the cyberspace levels from the base game, which all felt pretty safe. I mean, I get why they're like that, because if they make them too hard, then the normies will complain. And so with this DLC, longtime fans are the ones who are going to be playing them, so you can make them actually a little challenging. Like, there's good stuff in these levels. There was even some actual precision platforming for the first time in these, and I can't even remember how long. Like that one city level where you have to jump on the skewed iron boxes to try to reach the top.
Yeah.
Like, there hasn't been anything like that in a 3D Sonic game in like 20 years. So like, I appreciated all of those things. I'm going to grant you all of that. I understand why you enjoy playing these levels. But holy Jiminy Cricket Crimbus Christ motherfucker, those missions were some dog shit. And we gotta talk about them. I've done them all twice now.
Here's the thing, though, that I will grant you, is that, like, when I played through it, and I will let you finish, regarding the base game, you felt more of an incentive to go after all the other missions because they had a crucial unlockable. They got the Chaos Emerald keys, you know? So you kind of felt more like you had to do it. I didn't, at the very least, I didn't feel that with these. You could literally run in, grab what you need, and get out, you know? You could just see the cyberspace stage and then beat it, and then you're done. And you don't have to go after the extra stuff. The extra stuff is there if you want to do it.
Well, technically, you don't have to play the game at all.
Well, technically, I don't have to shit my pants. I don't know.
But you probably shouldn't shit your pants.
And you probably shouldn't go after the extras.
So here's my thing. I totally get it. You are correct. You can, because they put so many lookout Coco in the open zone, you can get way more than you'll ever need and never have to touch a cyberspace level. That was also my experience. But I was determined to get my $0.00 worth of this DLC and actually play them through and 100% the whole thing, because I did it for the base game. Why not? How hard can it be? And my opinion is the secret exits, those were cool. The Tails races, those were also fine, because it was basically like, hey, find the fastest sprout, and you can integrate that with the S rank and get them both in one go.
Yeah.
Fine. And even the stuff where it's like, get to the end without triggering a mine, that's pretty straightforward. What I hate are those rings, and especially those damn animals. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Yeah, the animals were really bad.
And I think several problems
I couldn't
with
beat
those...
a single one of those. Like, what, do you have to carry them each one at a time to the end of the level?
No, there's like a little blue ring that you have to carry them to.
Still annoying.
And it's usually hidden, yeah.
Like, the problem with them is... a lot of these levels, like, I want to say there was a level that was like Honeycomb Highway from Sonic Lost World with a lot of hexagonal platforms.
Is that the one with the power boost?
I think it was in that level, yes. It was the one with all the buzz bombs.
That's what it felt like.
There were all of these, because like a lot of them, you'd make these big jumps, and then there'd be like 6 different honeycomb cells that you could land in. And I'm like, oh, one of the animals has got to be in these. Otherwise, why would they have so many of them? Like, I've got to explore and find these things. And it's like, no, the animals are all on the golden path, but they're also small enough that you can run right past them and not even notice them. Or they're on a lower path that you can't see because the camera's not focusing on them. So for every single one of these levels, I had to look up where the animals were because I could not for the life of me find them by myself. So, which means that when I replayed them the second time, I already knew where they all were, and it wasn't as bad the second time, because I knew roughly where they were this time, and where to take them. But the other big problem with these levels is that there is not a single damn checkpoint in any of them.
Yeah.
And it does the annoying thing that... You guys remember the cue ball, the pool ball red ring from Sonic Lost World?
Yes.
It's like these cyberspace levels were filled with like 6 of them. Or like, it's like every one of these missions for the green rings and the silver moon rings were all like that. You gotta go to this specific section of the level, and you need to because it's really easy to miss them sometimes, because sometimes maybe they're in a path that's not readily visible, or maybe the numbered rings there's this one city level with the mines where like the numbered rings are spread out through the entire level, and there's a secret path that goes to a rail that you have to let yourself get hit by a mine to reach. Or there was that one annoying city level that had like the 3-gear boost thing.
That one
gimmick.
I never understood. Like, I don't
it's
understand
basically
what that
you
is.
speed up the longer you hold the button, is all it is.
Oh.
But the silver moon rings, it's like, imagine trying to play Speed Highway in Sonic Generations without the drift mechanic, and you go way slower, and you have much less control of yourself. Like, the controls just don't feel right. And basically what they want to do immediately at the start of the level is you're supposed to get all 5 of these things in a row without hitting a single car and while holding the boost down the whole time. And it doesn't sound that hard, but the sensitivity is bad. The thing with the silver moon medals is you have to get them all within a specific time frame where the last one will disappear and you can't get it. And another thing with all of these missions is you have to get everything in one go. It's not like the red rings where if you miss one, you can just go back and get the one you missed and then beat the level and you're done. You have to get all 5 silver moons and all 5 numbered rings and all however many of the animals all in one go.
Yeah.
And if you die, they all reset. So I swear to God, I was re-rescuing the animals in that Mine City stage like 100 different times because the game just refused to save any of my progress. And that got frustrating.
My favorite thing about these Find the Animal missions is that there is no animation that plays when Sonic picks up an animal. He literally stands there and then his body just snaps and contorts to holding the animal. And it's the funniest thing.
Yeah.
It looks so bad. I just wanted to share that with you.
I could rant much longer, but I think you guys get the picture. They're annoying and they suck. And really, if you just put in a checkpoint in these levels, it would be so much better.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, these missions are annoying. Like, the base levels can be fun. There is something to these. I see why you like them. But it seems like the game is just constantly fighting against itself to be fun. Because, like, for some reason, we couldn't put a single checkpoint in any of these levels. You have to beat them all in one go, and everything has to reset every time you die.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand why. These missions would be so much more fun if it wasn't so do or die. So
that I understand. Like I said, I didn't really make it a point to go after them because I knew it was going to be bullshit. And from everything that you said, yeah, it is. Maybe there was 1 or 2 stages where it's oh, hey, I managed to get all the moon rings, or oh, hey, I managed to get all the numbers, or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not something I actively tried to do, and I don't think I will. I was able to run through these things. I got the S ranks on all of them, and that was more than enough for me.
Yeah.
So,
but that like you said, even when you actually do finish the missions, they're pointless because they're way more than enough lookout cocoa to go around. So it's pretty much just for intrinsic satisfaction, and they weren't very intrinsically satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
So they fail all around. I only did them because I'm a sucker for completing platformers.
Yeah.
Even though it's a lot of the time it's painful. It's my own character flaw that's to blame for this. So, yeah.
Well, do we have anything else to say regarding the DLC? We covered the characters, the level design, cyberspace, towers, boss rush, final boss. What else was there?
Like I said, I enjoyed it much more the second time. Even aside from the mods, just knowing what the hell was going on, just knowing why I couldn't climb the wall, or that I wasn't going to need to talk to that one Elder Coco until later, knowing where the animals already all were, just having previous experience with this made it better. It shouldn't be required to have that to enjoy it, but that's true for virtually every Sonic game I've ever played, so that isn't, really bland. Even Sonic Adventure 2, as much as I love it, has jank in it, and some stuff that isn't clear the first time you play it. If I have to play it more than once to kind of get it, fine. I'm not over the moon with that fact, but I'll live with it. But I highly recommend to anyone watching this, if you're going to play it with mods, please. You will enjoy yourself a lot more. Knuckles will actually be playable, and the boss rush won't be as annoying.
Man, I guess my closing thought would be that, like, it's hard to say that I was disappointed by it because I genuinely don't know what I was expecting from the final DLC. I think with the other 2 waves that we got, I was genuinely surprised by what we got. So I guess, there was like a little bit of heightened expectation. It was like, okay, well, I mean, they did really good with these other 2. Let's see what they got with this one. And it wasn't as good. So, I guess there is a little bit of disappointment there. But ultimately, I think, I like the way how this isn't something you access through a menu. Like, it's not like, oh, you go to the title screen and, oh, here's the other story option. I like how it's like, oh, once when you get to the final island, you can just do this right from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
The way how I kind of see it, because I also saw some people say that, like, oh, this kind of ruins the whole game. I don't see that. I kind of just saw it as, like, post-game content. I saw it as, like, the dark side of the moon, or just like the typical post-game stuff that you do in a Kirby game. Usually it's like, it's a lot harder and maybe also not as fun. I don't think it weighs down the entire package, though. It's a little disappointing that, like, it didn't add a whole lot to the overall story. Like, again, like, it kind of ends the same way, despite the fact that characters have a bit more to do, but I just don't think they did enough. But it's hard for me to get, like, really upset over when it's just an offshoot. It's just something you can do on the side.
Yeah.
I want them to do better next time. Don't get me wrong. But, like, with what we got, I'm not, like, upset or I'm not angry about it. I'm not, like, Mick frickin' losing it. It's like, oh, well, I mean, oh, well. So.
Yeah.
But I mean, it still doesn't take away what I think about Sonic Frontiers. And I still think it's a great game. I still play it. It's still fun. So.
Yeah.
The updates did what it needed to do.
To me, it's pretty easy to separate this new story as a separate entity from the base game.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you there. What about you, Mr. Nick? What are your final thoughts?
Sonic Frontiers, the base game, but even more so this DLC. I feel like this is the game that brought Sonic back. I know that Sonic never really went anywhere, but it's got the feel of Sonic that I missed.
Mm-hmm.
The trajectory that the series was on until 06 ruined everything, and they decided they could never have any of these cool things again. They brought it back, and I think they did it very well. Like, considering like just how much they had to accomplish with this game with such a small budget.
Yeah.
And given that they didn't have to do any of this, they didn't have to spend a year just adding all this extra stuff to the game, but they did it. And I couldn't be happier for the future of Sonic. Like, looking at, Superstars, which was imperfect, that has its own problems. But still, it does things that Sega and Sonic Team swore for ages they would never do. They would never have a fully 2.5D classic Sonic game with all new zones. And then has creative stuff like the Emerald Powers. And then you have Dream Team coming out, which looks like it's going to be all kinds of fun. And it just feels like, yeah, that Sonic is back. And I just couldn't be happier, because it feels like we're getting back to, my favorite kind of 3D Sonic. And Frontiers just has me even more excited for whatever game comes out. Because this is one of the best performing Sonic games ever. Sonic's total sales over the course of the last 30 years, it's increased dramatically in just the last couple. Partly because of the movies making him popular again. And then, there's all these new games coming out. And it just feels like whatever drought we were in is over. Things are looking pretty good for Sonic.
Yeah, they definitely have been building up a lot of goodwill.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
It is up to Sega to keep up the pace. And Sega has a weird tendency of f***ing things up with Sonic. Notice how, with other series, it's not really the case. With the f***ing Yakuza or the Shin Megami Tensei Persona games or anything like that. They tend to be pretty okay with the other ones. It's always Sonic for some reason that, we deal with this kind of stuff. It's I would not say that we are not out of the woods yet, but it is possible that we are getting close. I'm going to wait a few more years. Because, a while ago, I made a video saying about, how I'm not really excited for the future of Sonic. And this was, in 2019, and, Sonic Forces was still fresh, and Izuka was like, oh, get ready for the 30th anniversary. And I'm like, what the hell? You want us to get excited for the 30th anniversary when you just flubbed up the 25th? And there's, nothing to look forward to, nothing to talk about, nothing to be excited about? So it's right now they're on the right path. Anything can happen. And I want them to do good. But I'm still on the skeptical side. I'm like, okay, well, let's see what else are you going to do? Because anything can happen.
That's another thing I want to point out. even during the dark ages of Sonic, we still got a lot of games.
Yeah!
And most of them were at least pretty fun, not outright horrible. And then after like Sonic Forces, it's like, okay, from now on, there will be one Sonic game every 5 years or so. But the trade-off is that they're going to be amazing. You know, is this going to be worth the wait? And then it's, I don't know, early on in Sonic Frontiers reveal, it looked like crap. So at that point, it's like, oh, okay, so it's going to take forever for them to release another Sonic game, and it's going to be dog shit each time. So what are we even waiting for? But then Frontiers came out, and it turned out good. And it just kept getting better over the last year. And now we've got Sonic Superstars, and we got Dream Team, and like there's all these like, collaborations with Lego and stuff. And I just feel like, yes, we're on the upswing. Keep going up. Keep that momentum.
And it's also, I heard that like there's something in the works coming out next year the Sonic team's been on. I don't know if they mean like a new game, a sequel to Frontiers. Doubt it's a sequel to Frontiers, but I mean, if Sonic Team pumps something out next year too, and it turns out good, then I think that's a pretty good standing. Next year, we're also getting the third Sonic movie. And these Sonic movies have been pretty good too.
I predict whatever 3D Sonic game they make as a follow-up to Forces will probably have smaller, tighter designed overworld areas. Not that much smaller, but, you know, a bit more manageable. The minigames will probably be better. And hopefully, like, whatever the cyberspace equivalent is, whatever actual stages there are, will be more fleshed out and have more original assets. Because it sounds like that's kind of what they want to go back to, is to make another adventure-esque game. And this game came pretty close. It may have just been a little too big for its own good, its own shoes. But I feel like it's almost there.
Iizuka definitely said when Frontiers came out that he wanted to make SA3.
We'll see. I mean, they probably won't call it SA3, but it'll probably be structured more like an adventure game.
Yeah, but
because I know I've said this already, but I think that's why they brought back stages from Sonic Adventure 2, was because it was seriously, apparently it was in question. It was in limbo. Like, they didn't know that people still liked those kinds of stages, and they needed us to remind them by playing them, which we did. So now they know.
Also, they've been dangling the SA3 carrot over our heads for f***ing years at this point. They've been like, oh, Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure. Fans like Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure.
Even though they already made a third Sonic Adventure game, it was called Sonic the Hedgehog.
And you know what? Hey, to give it credit, Chaos X has shown
and it's called Sonic Heroes, and it's called Sonic Unleashed.
At the very least, Chaos X showed that, like, yeah, you know, Sonic Adventure 3, like, it could be good. It could be good, you know, because Project 06, I mean, it's not like the most perfect thing in the world, but it's pretty f***ing good, you know? It's impressive. But, like, I don't know. If we ever get SA3, I will eat a boot. I'll do it, so help me God.
If they announce SA3, I'm going to make a bet with you.
Okay, what's the bet?
We have to read Sonic the Hedgehog World War II Dragon on the show.
Oh. You know what? I'll take that bet.
All right.
Because you also forget. Okay, yeah, well, we agree. Okay, so that's the bet.
But you don't get to use one of your three.
No.
You don't get to use one of your three skips.
No. We'll get there when we get there. We'll cross that road.
Yeah, regardless, I think we're all done here for today. Thank you all for joining. Before we head out, Nick, where can people find you?
There's my channel, NickOnPlanetRipple. I have a website. You can contact me through that. Like, I have a work email there. My books are available on itch.io. They're available on Amazon. And I have the usual, like, Instagram and Facebook and so on, but I admittedly don't post there as often as I should. I spend so much time just burying my nose in the work itself that I almost forget to tell people about it. But you can find me basically everywhere.
And just so you know, folks, you can get a physical print copy of Nick's books as well. They look really nice. Oh, yeah,
I'm also on Patreon.
Oh, hell yeah.
So you can get signed copies through that.
And Nick tours convention circuits as well, promoting his book. So, hey, if you got a book convention near you, maybe stop by. And, yeah, thank you very much for joining us today, Nick.
No problem.
I'm not sure. Probably the next thing is going to be the end-of-year podcast, which...
I am scared.
Oh, my God. There's so many games to talk about this year.
Terrified. So
about what kind of fan fiction I'm going to bring to the podcast?
Yeah, well, I got 3 shots.
I have a little game I want to play with you.
Oh!
But we'll talk about that next time.
Oh!
I've got a little thing in mind.
Oh, you son of a bitch. I knew I got off too easy. I want Uno. Let me have this.
No, I'm going to give you the opportunity to not have to use one of your 3 skips.
Oh.
And skip a fan fiction for free if you win.
I hate you. No. Oh,
so stay tuned for that, everybody. I'll definitely bring a fic next time.
Oh, Fixor didn't happen.
Until then, we'll see you all next time.
Fix out.
Nix or it didn't happen.